Chapter 1, they say the finest end for a general is to die on the battlefield. Astrid Sterling was dead, fallen on the northern frontier, 1,000 miles from home, pierced by 1,000 arrows. Clutching her crimson-tasseled spear, she knelt, bathed in blood. Through the hazy daylight, her last sight was the large, sterling insignia on the distant, fluttering military banner. Serafina Beaumont has been safely returned to Dezhou, hasn't she? Alaric Windsor. I have done as you wished, dispatched troops to Qi at your behest to retrieve Serafina. You must be overjoyed. The invincible war goddess, the ever-victorious female general, collapsed. She closed her eyes, the din of battle fading into silence. She plunged into an endless darkness. After a long silence, she'd expected to ascend to some heaven or descend into some hell. But when she opened her eyes again, she found herself back in the Imperial palace. Astrid stared blankly at her transparent form, then at Emperor Alaric Windsor, clad in Imperial robes, at the desk. Was this a dying hallucination? Alaric was slumped over the desk. He should have been reviewing state papers, but had accidentally fallen asleep. Gazing at his handsome, weary profile, Astrid instinctively reached out to touch him. But before her hand could make contact, his hawk-like eyes snapped open. He stared right at her. For a fleeting moment, Astrid almost believed he could see her. But Alaric merely frowned, withdrew his gaze, and sat up. A report, a palace attendant announced from outside the hall. Alaric pressed his temples, his voice flat. "Enter." A soldier, holding an express dispatch, hurried in and knelt. "Your Majesty, a great victory on the front lines. General Sterling has taken 3 enemy cities and successfully rescued Lady Serafina. The general has already sent an escort to bring Lady Serafina back. She awaits outside the palace gates. General Sterling." Before he could finish, Alaric shot to his feet, his voice agitated, excited, and filled with emotion. "Serafina is back." He had no interest in hearing the rest, his face alight with ecstatic joy as he strode out. We shall personally welcome her back to the palace." The reporting soldier stood awkwardly, the rest of his words unspoken, as Alaric had already departed. Astrid gave a bitter smile. She knew what else the man had intended to say. That in the last battle, to reclaim Serafina Beaumont for him, she had been struck 3 times by enemy blades. But they didn't know that Alaric wouldn't care. He only cared about Serafina. Then Astrid's transparent body was suddenly, uncontrollably pulled along behind Alaric. Only then did she truly understand. This was no dying dream. She was dead, yet she had returned to the capital in this form, a bound spirit, tethered to Alaric Windsor. Astrid floated helplessly behind him, wondering if this was compensation or torment. In life, she had been entangled with Alaric for over a decade. Were they to be inseparable even in death? Astrid hailed from a line of generals, but her family's prominence had aroused the late emperor's suspicion. He had ordered her to the palace as a prince's study companion, a gilded cage, in truth. She was 7 when she entered the palace. Back then, Alaric was merely the most disfavored of princes. They lived together in the cold palace. They had huddled together for warmth in a drafty room, knelt in punishment on snowy nights, shared a single chestnut cake when starving. Back then, Alaric had said that once he reached the pinnacle of power, he would be able to protect those he wished to protect. He had said, "Addie, when that time comes, I will protect you for all your life." And so, Astrid had accompanied him, from a downtrodden prince fighting his way to the throne. Yet, the first thing he did after his ascension was to dispatch troops to Qi to snatch Serafina Beaumont back. Serafina was the chancellor's daughter, married off to Qi in a political alliance 3 years prior. Crown Prince Kalin of Qi was rumored to be cruel, and her life there was said to be one of deep suffering. But it was only then that Astrid learned that the man she had accompanied for a decade, the one hidden in his heart, loved to the very marrow of his bones, was Serafina. Soon she floated with him to the palace gates. Alaric, the mighty emperor, stood there himself to welcome Serafina back. The sedan chair stopped before him. Serafina, supported by a maidservant, emerged. Seeing Alaric, she appeared somewhat flustered and unsure. Greetings, Your Majesty." Alaric's dark eyes were fixed on her. No one dared to look directly at the current emperor, but Astrid saw the look in his eyes. It was as profound as when Alaric had first seen Serafina, back when his status was still humble, his gaze upon her then one of restrained longing. Now, it held a certain unbridled intensity. The restraint was merely fear of startling Serafina, so he had fallen for her from their very first meeting. "You've endured much. I will escort you back to the palace." Alaric reached out to support her. Even Serafina seemed overwhelmed by the honor, but he, as if oblivious, naturally took her fair hand. Astrid watched his retreating back and suddenly wondered. When he learned that she had died on the battlefield to bring Serafina back, how would he react? Chapter 2, news from the northern frontier would take at least half a month to arrive. Astrid had only just died. The tidings of her death would likely not reach the capital for another 15 days. When it did, would Alaric feel guilt? Regret. 2 months ago, immediately upon ascending the throne, he had ordered the attack on Chi, solely to retrieve Serafina Beaumont. At the time, Astrid, along with all the court officials, had tried to dissuade him. The late emperor had just passed, his own foundation was unstable, but Alaric listened to no one. Because Astrid had objected so vehemently, he had made an example of her, sentencing her to 30 lashes with a military cane. After that, no one in court dared to oppose him. He loved Serafina that much, even willing to risk the dynasty he had fought so hard to secure. Finally, with his decree, Astrid led the troops to war. She was the renowned war goddess, victorious in over 90 battles. This time, too, she had performed impeccably, even if it was to reclaim his beloved for him. Back then, after successfully rescuing Serafina, fearing any mishap, Astrid had dispatched a large contingent to escort her back to the capital. But what she never anticipated was that, on the very night Serafina departed, the enemy launched a surprise attack. With only her remaining troops, she was outnumbered and ultimately perished at their hands. Astrid drifted closer, for the first time truly studying Serafina's face. She thought she could understand why Alaric was so captivated by her. Serafina was, after all, hailed as the fairest in Dezhou, with delicate brows and a lovely countenance. Her every move embodied the grace of a highborn lady. Perhaps every man in the world would adore such a woman. And herself, Astrid spread her hands, looking at palms calloused from years of warfare. She exuded the air of a warrior, always clad in armor or plain black attire. Who would truly love someone like her? She lowered her gaze bitterly, only then noticing the blood-stained arrows still embedded in her ghostly form. The sight of so much blood was shocking. Astrid should have felt no pain, yet an inexplicable ache throbbed in her heart. Alaric welcomed Serafina back to the palace as if she were a priceless treasure, assigning over 20 maidservants to attend her, terrified she might suffer the slightest discomfort. Stepping into the hall designated for her, Serafina discovered it was filled entirely with her own portraits, all painted by Alaric. Expressing his longing through art, her eyes widened in surprise. "Your Majesty, these." Serafina had not actually met Alaric many times. Even she didn't know why this reigning emperor was so deeply infatuated with her. But to be so highly esteemed by the most noble man in the realm was undeniably gratifying. Serafina lowered her eyes, a shy smile playing on her lips. "Your Majesty is a truly skilled artist." Alaric, however, began to put the paintings away. He gazed at Serafina with deep affection. "Now that you are by my side, these are no longer needed." A blush crept up Serafina's earlobes, her demeanor that of a young maiden in love. In the following days, a torrent of rare treasures, silks and satins, jewels and ornaments flowed into Serafina's chambers. Within 2 days, the entire palace knew how deeply the emperor doted on Lady Serafina. Alaric then issued an imperial edict. He would take Serafina Beaumont as his empress. With the grand wedding to be held in half a month, the edict shocked the entire court. Serafina had been married into Chi for 3 years. Not only had Alaric forcefully brought her back, but he now intended to make a remarried woman the Empress of Dezhou. This was an outrageous defiance of all convention. One could imagine the vehemence of the officials' opposition in court. During the morning assembly, several white-bearded old ministers fell to their knees with a thud. "If your Majesty insists on marrying Lady Serafina, you might as well execute this old servant first. Otherwise, this old servant will have no face to meet the late emperor in the afterlife. We implore your Majesty to retract the edict." A sea of kneeling figures filled the hall, but Alaric had always detested being dictated to. "The edict has been issued. A sovereign does not speak in jest. Our decision will not change." He argued with the stubborn ministers in the hall for a long time, the morning assembly ending later than usual. When he returned to the sovereign's hall, a rare trace of weariness touched his face. He leaned back in the carved pearwood chair, closed his eyes, and subconsciously called out, "Addie, my head aches. Come massage it for me." Astrid, floating transparently behind him, froze for a moment. Chapter 3, a bitter smile touched her lips. In the past, Alaric often suffered from headaches, and she had specially learned a massage technique to help relieve his pain. Was it only at times like these that he remembered her? The air remained silent. Alaric seemed to snap back to himself, his eyes holding a somewhat stunned expression. A young eunuch attending nearby, having heard His Majesty call out, spoke cautiously, "Your Majesty, General Sterling is still on the northern frontier." Alaric was silent for a long moment before finally asking, "When will she return?" The eunuch calculated the time. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, the army should return victorious in about half a month, according to the journey's length. "Is Your Majesty concerned for General Sterling?" Concerned? Astrid looked wistfully at the man on the high throne. If he truly worried about her, how could he have forced her to go to war, disregarding her unhealed wounds, all to reclaim his beloved? He had even issued a military order that if she were defeated, her entire clan would be executed. This war had been brutal. De Jo had lost nearly 50,000 of the Sterling army, including her. And all of this merely to help him retrieve one Serafina Beaumont. As expected, Alaric said coldly, "She is a skilled warrior. What is there to worry about?" He was thinking of something else. "However, when Astrid Sterling returns to court, it will be the day of my grand wedding to Serafina." His expression turned chilly, and the eunuch immediately understood Alaric's meaning. Since Alaric's ascension, the Imperial harem had remained empty. Only Astrid resided in the palace. A maidservant had once seen His Majesty carrying her out of the hot springs, their posture exceedingly intimate. Moreover, Alaric made no secret of it, spending every night in Astrid's bedchamber. Though she was not a concubine or empress, everyone in the palace tacitly understood their relationship. Astrid instantly grasped his thoughts. She had always believed that Alaric not giving her a title was perhaps to protect her. Not until he sent her to the battlefield, not until he was ready to marry Serafina the moment she returned, did Astrid finally realize how laughable her own notions had been. When he was in despair, she was a pawn in his game for power. When he couldn't have his beloved, she was a tool to relieve his desires. When he needed to wage war, she was the emperor's blade in his hand. Perhaps Alaric had never, from beginning to end, offered her a single shred of genuine affection. Those days they spent together in the cold palace were nothing but an ephemeral dream. An unbearable, bitter pain gnawed at Astrid's heart. She murmured, "So, you were deceiving me all along, weren't you?" No one would answer her. Alaric soon went to Serafina's palace again, spending the afternoon with her. But after the evening meal, he did not stay the night, returning instead to his own bedchamber. Towards his beloved, he wouldn't even touch her before giving her a proper title. Astrid recalled the wanton nights she had spent with him and laughed at her own folly. "Alaric Windsor, I have been wounded so many times in this life, but only you have wounded me the deepest, the most painfully." Night. The moonlight was cold and clear. In the bedchamber of the sovereign's hall, Alaric was still awake in the dead of night. Perhaps because Astrid had been mentioned today, his mind kept drifting uncontrollably to her. He tossed and turned, unable to find peace, finally rising and taking a palace lantern as he walked out. Astrid followed him, bewildered, wondering where he was going at this ungodly hour. Then she saw him walk into the Jade Pavilion, the bedchamber she once inhabited. Inside the Jade Pavilion, only a single maidservant was cleaning. Alaric's sudden appearance startled her. "Your servant greets Your Majesty." Lucy Miller knelt in alarm. Since General Sterling had departed for the campaign, His Majesty hadn't visited the Jade Pavilion for who knew how long. Why would he suddenly appear in the middle of the night? Seeing Lucy, Astrid also felt a wave of emotion. Lucy was her only personal maidservant. Had she known she wouldn't return, she should have arranged a future for her before leaving. Alas, in this life, she had ultimately accomplished nothing. Alaric looked at the familiar furnishings in the palace, an increasingly strange emotion stirring within him. He felt only vexation and asked casually, "What are you cleaning at this hour?" Chapter 4. Lucy, still kneeling, replied, "Your Majesty, just now a sparrow flew into the wall and died, and there was some blood. I heard the general will be returning in a few days. The general dislikes the sight of blood, so your servant thought to clean it up first." Astrid disliked the sight of blood? Alaric frowned. This was the first he'd heard of it. He found it absurd. Astrid Sterling is a military commander, a veteran of countless battlefields. How could she be afraid of blood? Lucy shook her head. Your servant doesn't know why, but the general truly is afraid of blood. Every time she sees it, she's bound to have nightmares that night. And with the nightmares, she gets a fever, almost to the point of death. Once, your servant heard General Sterling crying in her sleep, saying she had harmed too many people. Julian Chow, Silas Zai, Crispin Cui. She said she was so scared. Hearing these names, Alaric's expression changed instantly. Others might not know, but how could he not? These names belonged to the very stumbling blocks he had ordered Astrid to eliminate for him during his fight for the throne. Astrid's martial prowess was exceptional. The struggle for succession had been perilous, and many ministers did not support Alaric's ascension. Astrid, as the blade in his hand, had served her greatest purpose by removing those obstacles for him. Alaric had assumed killing was not difficult for her. He never knew that after every enemy she felled, she alone endured those blood-soaked nightmares. So, perhaps, at the moment of her death on the northern frontier, Astrid had even felt a sense of relief. It's good to die like this, she might have thought. In her life, she had killed countless people. Such an end was perhaps fitting. Lucy, seeing Alaric's somber expression, dared not speak further. Your servant will take her leave. With that, she prepared to withdraw. Clink. Then, a jade pendant fell from her person. Lucy was about to pick it up when another hand snatched it away. Upon seeing the jade pendant, Alaric's expression contorted. He looked as if he'd gone mad, his face dark as he seized Lucy by the throat. "Insolence, where did you steal this pendant?" Lucy, nearly suffocating, struggled desperately. "Your Majesty, this was a gift from the general." Impossible. Alaric's eyes were ice cold. He viciously threw Lucy to the ground. "Nonsense, why would she ever give this to you?" Lucy, finally able to breathe, gasped for air, kneeling and trembling as she replied, "Your servant dares not lie. It was truly a gift from the general before she left for the campaign. The general said she no longer wanted it." Instantly, a violent shock coursed through Alaric. Astrid merely stared at the jade pendant, slightly dazed. It was indeed the one she had given to Lucy. She knew very well why Alaric was so enraged. Because this jade pendant was the token of love he had given her years ago. This pendant had, for so many years, symbolized the bond of affection and loyalty between them. 7 years ago, on Astrid's birthday, Alaric had personally hung this jade pendant on her. He had said, "Addie, I sought this for you. It will protect you for a lifetime." From then on, Astrid had cherished this pendant as their token of love. She had once said that as long as this pendant was on her person, no matter how far apart they were, if Alaric needed her, she would rush to his side. For all these years, the pendant never left her, and she had fulfilled every promise made to him. It was she who helped him secure the succession, escorting him as he fought his way out of the palace gates, trading a body full of wounds for his position as crown prince. It was she who, on the day of his enthronement, withstood a rain of arrows and beheaded the rebel leader with a single strike, safeguarding his empire. And it was she, again, who donned armor and went to war on the frontier for him, to reclaim his beloved. Alaric had thought this time would be no different from before. But now, Astrid had given this jade pendant to someone else. How could he not understand her meaning? Astrid had discarded the jade pendant. She didn't want it anymore. She didn't want him anymore. This also meant, from this day forward, she no longer wanted him. Chapter 5. Realizing this, his fury intensified, a fire raging in his chest, threatening to consume him entirely. Unable to vent his burning anger, he snatched the jade pendant and stormed out of the jade pavilion. After leaving the jade pavilion, Alaric returned to his bedchamber, any lingering drowsiness utterly dispelled by rage. His dark eyes stared fixedly at the jade pendant in his hand, growing more irritated the longer he looked. He remembered her promise that she would never take it off in this lifetime, yet now she had casually gifted it to a servant. Finally, he smashed the jade pendant violently onto the floor. Clang, the jade instantly shattered into pieces. Astrid watched him quietly, not understanding why Alaric was so angry. She had helped him achieve his grand ambitions, helped him retrieve Serafina Beaumont. She was of no more use to him. Why would he be so furious over a mere jade pendant? Astrid Sterling, fine, you are truly fine. You wish to draw a clear line between us. As you wish, Alaric paced back and forth, then shouted in a deep voice towards the outside of the hall. Attendants, bring me ink and brush. The palace attendants outside, seeing His Majesty so enraged, tremblingly brought the writing materials. Alaric immediately drafted an edict. After finishing, he threw it directly to the eunuch responsible for proclaiming decrees. When Astrid Sterling returns to the capital, read this edict to her. And on the edict, only a short sentence was written: Grand General Astrid Sterling has incurred the Emperor's wrath. She is hereby sentenced to be permanently stationed at the border. She may not return to the capital without express command. The eunuch glanced at it and was instantly alarmed, fearfully pleading for Astrid. Your Majesty, General Sterling has meritorious military service, and moreover, she has always been loyal and devoted to you. Now, she has even greatly defeated the enemy and retrieved Lady Serafina for you. If this edict is issued, it will surely chill the hearts of the ministers. Alaric's gaze swept over him coldly. Are you questioning the royal we? The eunuch immediately knelt. Your servant dares not. It is only that, having served your Majesty for all these years, I have witnessed with my own eyes General Sterling's sincere devotion to you. 3 years ago, when you were suffering from a high fever that wouldn't break, it was General Sterling who lay in the snow until she was ice cold, then returned to hold you and bring your temperature down. 2 years ago, during the spring hunt, a frenzied leopard nearly bit off your right arm. It was General Sterling who threw herself forward without a second thought. A year ago, when the 7th Prince sent assassins to kill you, it was also General Sterling who took a sword blow for you. General Sterling is loyal to the crown and country, a rare individual who has always held your Majesty in the highest place in her heart. I implore your Majesty to reconsider. The old eunuch, head eunuch Miles, was the one who had served Alaric the longest, hence he dared to say these things. And Alaric, recalling those past events, felt his dark eyes waver. But then his gaze fell upon the shattered jade pendant nearby. He said coldly, Astrid used to warm my bed. If Serafina learns of this, she will surely be troubled. Astrid and I can never meet again in life or death. Astrid, floating nearby, laughed out loud. Never meet again in life or death. Alaric, oh Alaric, aren't we, at this very moment, exactly that? Afterward, the first thing Alaric did after every court session was to go to Serafina Beaumont's bedchamber. Towards her, he seemed to possess endless patience. Usually a cold and aloof person, he would accompany her in trying on the bridal coronet and gown, dine with her, and even willingly accompany her to the monastery to pray for blessings. That day, Alaric specifically postponed his official duties to accompany her out of the palace. They journeyed to Lan Yin Monastery, the most renowned in the capital. To welcome the current emperor and the future empress, the monastery had already cleared out other pilgrims. Only the abbot, Master Silas, leading a group of monks, was there to greet Alaric. Lan Yin Monastery had a wishing tree, said to be very efficacious. If one hung a wishing ribbon on the tree, lovers could be together for a lifetime, never to be parted. The poor could achieve success and fortune, earning vast sums daily. Scholars could pass examinations and become top scholars. Alaric never believed in such things, but since Serafina wished to come, he accompanied her without a second word. They both received wishing ribbons and wrote on them. Alaric held Serafina's hand and spoke earnestly. May we join hands until our hair turns white, may we have joy every year, and may every year be like today. Chapter 6, Astrid floated behind them, watching with a somewhat dazed expression. She had never imagined that one day she would see Alaric Windsor utter such words. In the past, she had countless times suggested they come to Lan Yin Monastery together to pray for blessings. He had always brushed it off with excuses like, superstitions are not to be believed. It turned out he wasn't a non-believer, he simply wasn't willing to come with her. A wave of melancholy washed over Astrid. Not wanting to watch any longer, she drifted further away from them. But as she turned, she saw Master Silas, the abbot of Lan Yin Monastery, staring in her direction. Astrid's eyes froze. Then she quickly realized she was now a formless, invisible spirit. No one could see her. She had intended to float past Master Sila's, but as she passed him, she saw him suddenly bring his palms together. "The Buddha's compassion be with you." Astrid subconsciously stopped. She spoke, her voice laced with disbelief. "Master, can you see me?" Master Silas sighed softly. "Spirit, your mortal remains will soon return to your homeland. I urge you to release your attachments and find peace in the afterlife soon." Hearing this, Astrid gave a bitter smile. She looked towards Alaric and Seraphina by the wishing tree. Perhaps she truly had to wait until the day she turned to dust and ashes before she could truly let go. Master Silas did not linger. After speaking, he departed. Meanwhile, Alaric and Seraphina had already hung their wishing ribbons. Seraphina glanced sideways and saw the words Alaric had written. "One lifetime, one love, one pair." 7 simple words, yet they shook her to the core. Alaric, the mighty emperor, was willing to promise her one lifetime, one love, one pair. Seraphina looked up at Alaric's eyes, equally astonished, and saw the unwavering resolve in their depths. Over these past few days, Seraphina had naturally seen how much Alaric adored her. He had waged war against Chi for her, losing tens of thousands of soldiers. He had even disregarded all established norms to make her his empress. Not only was she showered with boundless affection, but there were even subtle signs that he intended to dote on her exclusively. Tears of emotion welled in Seraphina's eyes. She reached out and tugged at Alaric's sleeve. "Your Majesty," he took her hand in his. "Seraphina, these words are not feigned. Of 3,000 waters I take but one ladle. Henceforth I shall have only you." Astrid listened to this earth-shattering promise, her eyes stinging fiercely. The promise she had striven for with all her might and never obtained was, for Seraphina, so easily within reach. Just as Seraphina was about to say something, a wind suddenly picked up outside. She was of delicate constitution. Alaric immediately prepared to lead her into the monastery to shelter from the wind. The sudden gust blew many wishing ribbons off the wishing tree. Alaric initially paid no mind, until he inadvertently glanced down and saw familiar handwriting on a wishing ribbon that had fallen at his feet. His steps faltered. "May Alaric Windsor be healthy and live a long life." This was Astrid's handwriting. He knew it all too well. A tremor ran through Alaric's heart. He subconsciously bent down and picked up the wishing ribbon. As he walked forward, step by step, he discovered that many of them were ones Astrid had left behind. Each one bore a different plea. May Alaric Windsor's ambitions be realized. May Alaric Windsor have peace and joy and 100 years without worry. May Alaric Windsor have success in all endeavors and fortune in all matters. Every word, every phrase was about him. Alaric picked up one wishing ribbon after another, the emotions in his eyes growing increasingly complex, until he picked up the last one. He looked at the words written on it, his spine suddenly stiffening. May Alaric Windsor and Astrid Sterling love each other without doubt, and join hands until their hair turns white. Chapter 7. Seeing those words, Astrid too was stunned. Then, she laughed self-deprecatingly. She had been so naive back then, truly believing she could find a place in Alaric Windsor's heart. Believing he genuinely had feelings for her. Believing that once the empire was stable, they could live a simple life together. But she had no idea she was merely a tool for Alaric's ascent to power. What love, what growing old together, it had all become a joke. Alaric clutched the wishing ribbons tightly, countless memories flooding his mind. In previous years, on her birthday, Astrid would always beg him to accompany her to Lan Yin Monastery to pray for blessings. But he always refused, every single time. Given Astrid's nature, she wasn't one to pester endlessly, so after each refusal, she never brought it up again. Alaric had thought she had given up on coming to Lan Yin Monastery. Only now did he realize that Astrid had come every year, and on every wishing ribbon, she had written her heart's desires, all concerning him. Driven by some unknown emotion, Alaric gathered all the wishing ribbons. He wanted to take them back. Astrid stared, stunned by his actions. Even Seraphina's heart tightened. Her eyesight was good. She naturally saw whose name was signed on them. Throughout Dezhou, everyone knew of Astrid's unwavering devotion to Alaric. But what about Alaric's feelings for her? It was said they had been companions for many years, a bond far deeper than any she could claim. Seraphina slowly clenched her fists, a sense of crisis suddenly blooming in her heart. Even now, she didn't understand why Alaric doted on her so much, but only through his favor could she escape the fiery prison of Qi and even become the Empress of Dezhou. She would never willingly lose this chance. "Your Majesty, I feel so dizzy." She frowned, pressing her hand to her forehead. Her frail appearance quickly caught Alaric's attention. He instantly snapped back to reality, rushing to her side. "Seraphina, what's wrong?" "Perhaps it's the wind. Your Majesty, shall we return to the palace?" Alaric naturally complied. He immediately forgot about the wishing ribbons, handing them to the eunuch behind him, while he swept Seraphina into his arms and carried her down the mountain. The Imperial Palace. After returning to the palace, Seraphina resolved to firmly capture his heart and immediately put her plan into action. That evening, she personally cooked a table full of dishes. She also opened a jar of pear blossom wine, inviting Alaric to her palace to drink with her. Seraphina was exquisitely dressed, a moon-white silk robe paired with her ink-black long hair, appearing like a fairy under the moonlight. She was adept at showcasing her best features, her face lightly adorned with only a touch of rouge. Her delicate, ethereal demeanor would captivate any man. Even Astrid, after drifting into the palace, couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Truly a beauty sculpted by heaven itself. When Alaric saw her attire that evening, he too was momentarily lost in thought, then said, "The wind is strong at night, be careful not to catch a chill. Have a maidservant bring you a shawl." Seraphina hadn't expected his first reaction to be concern for her. She paused, then nodded shyly. "Your Majesty, I made all these dishes myself. Please try them." Saying this, she picked up a piece of bamboo shoot and placed it in Alaric's bowl. But he only took one bite and suddenly put down his jade chopsticks. Disappointment filled Seraphina's eyes. She bit her lip and asked, "Does it not taste good?" Alaric's gaze had been distant. Hearing her words, he snapped back. He smiled to reassure her. "No, it's very good." Behind him, Astrid stared at the bamboo shoot dish, immediately understanding why he had been distracted. Perhaps he was thinking of her. Chapter 8, Astrid Sterling had spent her life on horseback. What little tenderness she possessed was entirely reserved for Alaric Windsor. This included personally cooking for him. Back then, her hands, accustomed only to wielding swords and spears, had attempted to cook. She'd nearly set the kitchen on fire before managing to produce just this one bamboo shoot dish. The dish hadn't looked appetizing then, but Alaric had eaten it without a word. "How is it?" At that moment, Astrid had been more nervous than on her first battlefield, constantly observing his expression. "If it's bad, just spit it out." To her surprise, Alaric not only didn't spit it out but smiled and kissed her. Astrid, kissed into a daze, heard him whisper with a light laugh in her ear, "The craftsmanship is indeed lacking. I need something sweet to recover." His words had made Astrid's cheeks flush red. Those days were perhaps their sweetest times together. Astrid stood disconsolate in place, watching him and Seraphina raise their cups in a toast. After the meal, Alaric had a few too many cups of wine, and Seraphina proactively helped him into the bedchamber. Only then did Astrid realize that Seraphina's purpose tonight seemed to be more than just drinking. In the vast bedchamber, the palace attendants had long since been dismissed. Seraphina led Alaric to the bed and removed her outer robe. Then she tightly embraced Alaric's waist, looking up at him with a hazy gaze. "Your Majesty, allow your servant to attend to your rest." Saying this, she blushed and reached to undo Alaric's belt. But the next second, Alaric grabbed her wrist, stopping her. Seraphina froze. Those few cups of wine were far from enough to intoxicate Alaric. He looked at Seraphina with clear eyes and, astonishingly, helped her put her discarded robe back on. This action felt like a harsh slap across her face. Seraphina asked, her voice choked with sobs, "Is your Majesty displeased with me?" She knew her status as a remarried woman was not glorious, which was why she wanted to firmly capture his heart now. But Alaric shook his head, then helplessly drew the weeping beauty into his arms. "Seraphina, you are someone I cherish immensely. I wish to give you the best of everything. You should not debase yourself like this. These matters, let us wait until our wedding night, when we are truly husband and wife." Seraphina's heart trembled. She never imagined Alaric would treat her with such profound respect. Gazing into Alaric's affectionate eyes, she finally couldn't help but ask, "Your Majesty, why do you like me?" They had clearly only met a few times before, yet Alaric loved her so deeply. This was a question Astrid also wanted to know the answer to. Alaric smiled, stroking Seraphina's dark hair, and recalled that day. 10 years ago, I was of humble status, forced by Consort to kneel in the snow for a day and a night. The snow was heavy that night, and the palace attendants said I might not live to see the next day, yet no one dared to plead for me before Consort. I was covered in snow, my body nearly frozen solid. Before I fainted, I vaguely saw you, draped in that snow-white fox fur cloak, running towards me. It was you who saved me. The next day, jade spirit balm was on my table. Such an expensive medicine, no one in the entire palace would have been willing to use it on me. I knew it must have been you who brought it. Seraphina, from that moment on, I swore that I would never fail you in this life. After hearing this, Seraphina froze completely in place. Because the person in Alaric's memory, the one draped in a snow-white fox fur cloak rushing towards him, was not her at all, and the jade spirit balm the next day was not brought by her either. Astrid, too, stood frozen. She never imagined that fate could be so cruelly ironic. That night, to save Alaric, she had gone to plead before Imperial Consort and endured 99 lashes before finally persuading Consort to relent. Because of the whipping, Astrid, in tattered clothes and covered in bloody welts, couldn't go out. It was then she encountered Seraphina Beaumont passing by. At that time, Seraphina, seeing her pitiful state, had gifted her a fox fur cloak she no longer wanted. Astrid had then draped that cloak over herself and run to the Imperial lake, saving the already delirious Alaric. That night, the figure he saw before fainting was actually Astrid. The jade spirit balm the next day was also something Astrid had kowtowed countless times for at the Imperial infirmary. To save Alaric, Astrid had first endured lashes, then kowtowed, nearly losing half her life. She simply hadn't wanted Alaric to worry, so she had deliberately avoided him for those few days. But she could never have imagined that this incident would cause him to mistakenly fall in love with Seraphina. It turned out that what she had pursued for half her life without obtaining was rightfully hers. But such were the errors due to strange combination of circumstances of fate. A sour pain filled Astrid's heart, and she let out an utterly absurd laugh. Alaric, oh Alaric. Alaric Windsor and I, in the end, were destined to meet but not to be together. Chapter 9. After Alaric finished his story, he noticed Seraphina's complexion seemed even worse. Seraphina, what's wrong? Seraphina quickly came to her senses, forcing a smile. Nothing, I was just thinking that on that day, I was ultimately a little too late in saving you. She lowered her eyes, concealing her panic and guilt. Even if Alaric had mistaken her for someone else, she had to let this mistake continue. She was unwilling to return to Chi, and even more unwilling to give up the Empress's position that was within her grasp as for Astrid Sterling. As long as she became Empress before Astrid returned to court, Astrid would then be dispatched to guard the border permanently, posing no threat. Alaric embraced her a little tighter, his voice doting. Your appearance alone was enough. Seraphina lay obediently in his arms. Astrid watched, numb and calm. So be it, I am already dead. The truth was useless to her now. Such was fate. Astrid no longer wanted to float by Alaric's side like this. She began to try to leave, but found she couldn't move more than 30 feet away from him, until the day of Alaric and Seraphina's grand wedding drew near. The entire palace was adorned with lanterns and colorful decorations, with bright red double happiness characters everywhere. And the day when news of Astrid's death would arrive was also drawing closer. The new emperor was taking an empress. The entire nation celebrated. On that day, tens of thousands of commoners gathered outside the Golden Audience Hall to offer congratulations. Alaric, supporting Seraphina, walked step by step to the highest point of the imperial altar. According to the rites of Dezhou, the ceremony would be complete once the emperor and empress jointly offered sacrifices to the ancestors. Seraphina wore a phoenix coronet and a magnificent empress's gown. They walked to the front of the altar, but as Alaric looked at her face, his thoughts involuntarily drifted to another person. The one who was far away on the northern frontier. Under the gaze of tens of thousands, Alaric still hadn't lit the pyre on the altar. Even the high priest couldn't help but urge him, Your Majesty, the auspicious hour has arrived. It is time to light the fire. But Alaric seemed not to hear. He looked towards the palace gates. He suddenly asked the eunuch behind him, Has Astrid Sterling not yet returned victorious? Logically, the half-month period was up. Astrid should have returned to the capital long ago. The eunuch didn't know why either, and could only say, perhaps General Sterling was delayed on the road. Your Majesty, Her Majesty the Empress-to-be is still waiting for you. But Alaric stubbornly wanted to wait for Astrid's return. He had a feeling Astrid wouldn't miss this moment. But the palace gates remained empty. No one appeared, and no one dared to urge him further. Astrid floated behind, watching his rare display of stubbornness, yet feeling very perplexed. Alaric, what are you waiting for? Today is the moment your long-cherished wish comes true. How could you spare a thought for me? Astrid didn't understand, but suddenly, she felt her originally transparent body become inexplicably lighter. Seeing that the auspicious hour was about to pass, the high priest couldn't help but speak again. Your Majesty, it is time to light the fire. Yes, Your Majesty, it is time to light the fire. Alaric glanced sideways at Seraphina's expectant gaze and finally extended his hand. Just as he picked up the torch, about to ignite the pyre on the Imperial altar, a commotion suddenly erupted at the palace gates. A reporting guard ran back, shouting excitedly, "Report the Sterling army returns triumphant. Report the Sterling army returns triumphant. The Sterling army returns triumphant to the palace. The main force is now approaching the city gates." Alaric's movement paused. He couldn't help but look up, anticipation in his eyes. Countless court officials were also ecstatic, eagerly awaiting the army's arrival. What no one saw was, at the city gates, a host of soldiers, having shed their armor, were clad in white mourning clothes. They solemnly pushed thousands of coffins draped in white silk towards the palace gates. In the very center, carried aloft, was a black coffin inscribed with the character, Sue Sterling. The body within was draped with the Sterling army's banner. Covered in blood, pierced by 1,000 arrows, the white-clad army played a mournful dirge. Singing a lament in unison, Astrid suddenly felt a sharp, intense pain in her chest. As the faint sounds of the dirge reached her ears and the army was about to reach the palace gates, a tear suddenly slipped from the corner of her eye. The soul returns to its homeland. Soldiers, we are home. The palace gates were thrust open by the army. And then her ethereal body abruptly dissipated, vanishing into the vastness of heaven and earth. Chapter 10, the torch fell abruptly to the ground, scattering a few sparks. Seraphina cried out, instinctively taking half a step back. She bit her lip, knowing this marriage could no longer proceed. A surge of anger rose within her, yet she forced tears of grief, looking at Alaric through a hazy veil. Your Majesty? Her words were choked back by fear before they could escape. Seraphina had never seen Alaric with such a grim, forbidding expression. He clenched his jaw, his brow dark as a blizzard. Utterly disregarding the extinguished torch that symbolized good fortune, he stumbled 2 steps down from the platform and ran towards the approaching army. Seraphina watched Alaric's staggering retreat, for a moment unable to believe the faint intuition in her heart. Weren't they saying His Majesty had no feelings for Astrid Sterling? Alaric shoved aside Charles Quillen, who tried to stop him, roaring, "You deceitful, worthless fools! Astrid's martial skills are so formidable. How could she possibly die? Get out of my way, don't block the royal we." His mind was in turmoil, his composure shattered. In full public view, he reached out to open the coffin lid. But the coffin had been nailed tightly shut for stability during the journey. Alaric, heedless of his hands becoming bloodied from prying, murmured, "Astrid, Addie, you must be cross with me. Did you hear about that edict? I was only trying to scare you. I won't leave you in the borderlands forever. I'll rescind it right now." Before he could finish, the coffin lid flew off under his forceful effort, revealing Astrid's lifeless body within. Alaric stood frozen, his pupils constricting, even his breath catching in his throat. She had lost so much weight due to this war. The armor hung loosely on her corpse, unable to conceal the shocking, fatal wounds. Were it not for the mottled bloodstains and the utter stillness of her chest, her serene face and closed eyes might have made one mistake her for merely sleeping. Charlie Quillen let out a mournful cry, the 7-foot man weeping like a child. He fell to his knees, wailing, "Your Majesty, General Sterling dedicated her life to her country, giving her all until her dying day. Please, Your Majesty, let her rest in peace." His voice gradually softened, leaving only grief, Behind him, a sparse wave of kneeling figures followed. "We beg your majesty, do not dishonor her further." Alaric's hands trembled slightly from the exertion. His eyes were bloodshot. Utterly bereft, he reached out to touch Astrid. On many unacknowledged days and nights, Alaric had felt Astrid. That imposing, valiant female general, once stripped of her cold, hard armor, always enveloped all his anxieties with her bare, soft body. She was warm, gentle, and should not be stiff and cold like this. A drop of water splashed onto the corner of Astrid's eye, trickling down her skin. Alaric's heart leaped. He almost thought it was Astrid crying, but the tears flowed endlessly from his own eyes. The young emperor, as if struck by a devastating blow, doubled over in pain, pressing his head against the coffin. His voice was so hoarse it sounded as if he were tearing his throat raw, brokenly saying, "Issue the order. The sterling army is to be rewarded according to merit. Grant them 100 taels of gold each and 1,000 acres of fertile land. Posthumously bestow upon General Astrid Sterling the title General, Defender of the Realm." A grand celebration had turned into national mourning. The pervasive red was replaced with white silk. Serafina, however, knew that at this moment, she absolutely could not show any dissatisfaction. She stood outside the emperor's bedchamber, speaking softly to the tightly closed doors and windows. "Your Majesty, please eat something. General Sterling wouldn't want to see you neglect your health like this." Chapter 11. Alaric gazed at the ornate, carved beams of the ceiling. In just a few short days, the once spirited emperor had become gaunt, a shadow of his former self. Would Astrid truly not want to see him like this? Alaric laughed self-deprecatingly. She must hate him to the core. Before him lay a pile of letters, all sent by Astrid from the border when the fighting was intense, accompanied by military reports. The Alaric of the past wouldn't have even bothered to open them for a second look. His heart felt hollow. A random thought prompted him to send servants searching for a long time, and only then were they found amidst a dusty pile of books. Outside, the gentle, soft voice of the woman he thought he loved could be heard, but Alaric remained unresponsive. He stared at the elegant handwriting on the desk, and after a long pause said, "Serafina, let me be alone for a while." No matter how unwilling Serafina was, she dared not object and turned away in a huff. Astrid's short life was filled with wielding blades and spears. The delicate art of being a gentle, scholarly companion was beyond her. Though she had entered the palace as a study companion in her youth, she often ended up taking the teacher's beatings for Alaric. Alaric was not favored, and by extension, the servants in their neglected wing of the palace treated them poorly. A leaking roof would go unrepaired for months despite reports. Summer ice rations were never their share. The tutor would ask Alaric to compose poetry, but he lacked even ink and paper, so the tutor would mete out punishment. No matter how ignored he was still a prince, so it was always the study companion, Astrid, who bore the blows. The tutor, raising his ferule, cared not whether she was male or female, striking Astrid's palm until it was swollen and her eyes welled with tears. Whenever this happened, Alaric's fleeting look of intolerance would be noticed by Astrid. Though tears still brimmed in her eyes, she would always grin and lean in, saying playfully, "Teacher's strength is so weak, are all you scholars so delicate? He doesn't hit half as hard as my father." Alaric realized his thoughts had wandered far again. He broke free from the memories of many years ago and gently broke the wax seal on a letter. Astrid's handwriting couldn't be called elegant, certainly not comparable to the chancellor's daughter's dignified script. It could only barely be described as neat. She couldn't compose poems or couplets. Her words directly expressed her longing, often with mistakes, which she would cover with a thick dot of ink. This was a terrible habit, yet as Alaric read, he found it childlike and endearing and couldn't help but smile softly. "Alaric, I suffered a small defeat today. Don't worry, conquering Chi is but a matter of 10 days. Alaric glanced at the date. It was exactly 10 days before the news of victory had arrived from the front, perfectly matching her prediction. "I'm not afraid of getting hurt, nor of killing, but I'm afraid I won't be able to return, afraid I'll never see you again." He had only just learned from Lucy that Astrid often suffered from restless nights due to seeing blood, and now here she was, lying and claiming to be fearless. Alaric gently caressed the characters, as if stroking Astrid's face. He didn't know what was wrong with him. A sour, suffocating anguish gnawed at his heart and lungs. Every breath he exhaled was tinged with pain. "Little liar," he choked out, his voice incredibly soft and intimate. "Sooner or later, I'll charge you with deceiving the sovereign." But the Astrid who would smile and playfully cajole him was gone, dead on the battlefields of the northern frontier, amidst wind and snow. Outside the window, a stream gurgled, the spring breeze thawed the ice, and as it passed through the hall, it stirred a clear, crisp ringing from the bell by his bed. Astrid had tied it there before she left for the campaign. He turned over the letter. On the back, a sentence was written. "The war in the north is urgent, and I fear I cannot convey my feelings to you at all times. If the long wind shakes the bell, it means I am thinking of you." He blinked and tears rolled down, blurring the naive handwriting. Chapter 12. The wedding was thus delayed. Alaric watched Astrid's casket being buried, the earth filled in, the tombstone erected, yet he still couldn't truly grasp that she was gone. The complex affairs of state couldn't fill the ever-widening void in his heart. Even though Serafina personally cooked and brought him meals every day, he found it difficult to swallow. More than half a month had passed since her death. Alaric lifted his aching head from the mountain of memorials piled on his desk, and once again, his thoughts turned to Astrid. Almost obsessively, he put down his brush, rose, and walked towards the jade pavilion. The old head eunuch Miles, serving beside him, saw his distracted state and dared not let him go alone, so he followed at a discreet distance. Alaric, however, suddenly stopped. He tilted his head, looking at a large tree by the roadside, its new buds trembling in the spring breeze. His tone held a hint of bewilderment. "Head eunuch Miles, what kind of tree is this?" The old eunuch was knowledgeable. He squinted, scrutinizing it for a moment, then bowed. "Your Majesty, this is a chestnut tree. It will bear fruit in autumn." "A chestnut tree," Alaric nodded. "Chestnut cakes are indeed very sweet." It was rare for him to be in a mood for idle chat. The old eunuch quickly smiled. "Your Majesty, the palace has all sorts of pastries. Chestnuts are not in season now. Would you care to try something else?" Alaric said. "All right, have the servants prepare them in the jade pavilion. I am heading there now." He vaguely remembered something, but his head ached even more. He lingered by the tree for another moment before continuing forward. Astrid had voluntarily requested to live here. The jade pavilion had a pleasant name, but was very remote. Alaric had almost never set foot in this place. The last time was also his first. Yet he found the surroundings remarkably familiar. The large tree he had just seen was probably much taller than before. This bluestone slab underfoot was engraved with small characters. The handwriting was messy, yet he understood it at a glance. Memory, like a slippery fish, joyfully escaped his grasp. Alaric walked, paused, and frequently reminisced until he reached the entrance of the jade pavilion. It was the same maidservant from last time, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Seeing him arrive, she immediately knelt, trembling. "Your Majesty, various pastries have been prepared in the courtyard. Please enjoy them." Alaric nodded and asked, "Your name is Lucy. Do you have someone you admire?" Chapter 13. According to custom, when a master in the palace passed away, the servants should also be dealt with accordingly. But Alaric thought Lucy was someone Astrid cared about, so he was willing to take the time to arrange a good future for her. Lucy, however, seemed flustered. She knelt and kowtowed repeatedly. "Your Majesty, can your servant not leave? Your servant is willing to stay in this palace, to perform morning and evening duties, to sweep and clean. I will not damage a single thing." She quickly kowtowed until her forehead was red and swollen. Alaric knew this loyal servant probably had a close personal relationship with Astrid, so he granted her wish. He picked up a pastry and put it in his mouth, only to find the filling too dry and cloying, or too sweet and lacking in richness, or not fragrant enough. He tasted over a dozen flavors, yet none were as delicious as the chestnut cake he had just been thinking about. But when exactly had he eaten chestnut cake? That was it. Alaric suddenly realized, and as he abruptly stood up, tea splashed all over him. 17 years ago, on that snowy night, he had been punished by kneeling in this very courtyard, without a drop of water all day, simply because he lacked paper and pen to write an essay. Astrid, as his study companion, naturally suffered the punishment with him. But her courage was far greater than that of Alaric, who only knew how to rigidly study the classics. She knelt and knelt, then ran off. When she returned, she had a piece of chestnut cake, stolen from the Imperial kitchen, already cold through leftovers from some palace concubine. But as children, they had sat shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee, and eaten it all, one bite for you, one bite for me. There was no chestnut cake in the world more delicious than that. Lucy was trembling because His Majesty had overturned the teacup, yet after kneeling in place for a long time, she saw no sign of his anger. She looked up doubtfully, only to see this reputedly temperamental emperor, his body trembling, silently shedding a face full of tears. Alaric wanted to laugh, but the corners of his mouth wouldn't lift. Yes, how could he have forgotten? This jade pavilion was the very cold palace where he and Astrid had lived together 17 years ago. Those days of being constantly constrained were the times Alaric most wanted to forget. Yet they were the years Astrid repeatedly recalled and deeply cherished. Except for some modifications made for the convenience of practicing martial arts, the rest of the layout was exactly the same as over a decade ago. On days when Astrid was not on campaign, she would quietly reminisce about the past in this place. Sharp pangs shot through Alaric's chest. He watched the fussing old eunuch bring clothes and push him into the main bedroom to change. Suddenly feeling extremely weary, he said softly, "Head eunuch Miles, I'll do it myself." The old eunuch hesitated for a moment, then still closed the chamber door for him and went out. This was where Astrid slept. It was very simply furnished, almost describable as bare-walled. The moment Alaric entered, he took in all the room's furnishings. The mattress on the bed was thin and looked hard. The teacups on the table were not fine. There was no dressing mirror, no cosmetics box. The only valuable item in the room was a wardrobe made of Nanmu wood. Alaric, as if possessed, took a step forward and opened it. The scent of dust assailed his nostrils, making him sneeze lightly. When he looked up again, very few clothes were neatly folded inside. Only one snow-white garment, as if its owner couldn't bear to fold and crease it, was hung reverently in the center, like stars around the moon. Alaric's pupils contracted. In an instant, his mouth went dry, his heart pounded like a drum, and he felt so dizzy he could barely stand. An obvious answer lay before him, yet at this moment, he dared not reach out. But it truly was that fox fur cloak. The hem was soaked with melted snow. Because it was extremely difficult to clean, Astrid had only managed to wipe it a few times, but dry mud stains still remained at the very end. Alaric stood before that wardrobe for a very, very long time, so long that even the old eunuch knocked worriedly on the door. He listened intently to the sounds within until the emperor began to laugh softly. The laughter grew louder and louder until it transformed into agonized wails. Head eunuch Miles panicked instantly, no longer caring about anything else, and flung open the door. His Majesty was clutching a snow-white fox fur cloak, slumped on the floor. He was crying so hard his expression was contorted, as if he had lost something incredibly important. Destined to meet, but not fated to be together. How cruel the twists of fate. Serafina bit her lip, restless and uneasy. These days, she often couldn't eat or sleep well. Ever since she learned of Astrid's death that day, Alaric, even when with her, always seemed absent-minded. Moreover, that snowy night, the one who saved Alaric was not her at all. And the fox fur cloak he mentioned, Serafina racked her brains and finally remembered it, was the very one she had casually gifted to Astrid. She dared not say it, dared not even bring it up. Although the wedding had not yet taken place, everyone around her already treated her as the empress, with the finest food, clothing, and amenities. These were good days Serafina had never even dared to imagine before. Anyway, that Astrid was already dead, her body buried in the earth. As long as she kept her mouth shut, how many people in this world could expose her? Serafina wasn't without thoughts of what she might face if the truth came out, but she also firmly believed that as long as she treated Alaric with all her heart, even if she wasn't the one who saved him that night, Alaric would still fall in love with her. Chapter 14, but Serafina Beaumont, no matter how she tried, could never have anticipated that this day would come so quickly. It was the second time she had seen Alaric Windsor with such an expression, like a ferocious beast. His remarkably handsome features were shrouded in a murderous rage, his face so dark it seemed water might drip from it. She turned pale with fright, kneeling and trembling on the spot. Alaric's cold, harsh voice came from above her head. "Do you truly have nothing to explain to me?" Your Majesty, Seraphina cried out pitifully. Your humble servant truly does not know what she has done wrong. I beg your Majesty to enlighten me. Falsely claiming the position of Empress was a capital offense, but what if she consistently denied it? Yet Alaric immediately shattered her illusions. He threw an object down at her head, the snow-white fur striking her delicate cheek painfully. It was the fox fur cloak. It's over, Seraphina thought in despair. But the one who had rescued her from that fiery torment was Alaric. The one who had killed her husband was also Alaric. And the one who had repeatedly professed his love for her, giving her hope, was still Alaric, perhaps knowing she was doomed. Seraphina strangely calmed down. She remained kneeling, the pitiable, flower-like vulnerability gone, her face now wooden. Alaric's voice was weary. Seraphina, explain yourself to the royal we. Seraphina said, I have nothing to explain, your Majesty. You said you loved me, and I was overjoyed, willing to become your empress despite the condemnation of the entire court. But why did you admit it? Why didn't you tell me you weren't the one who saved me that day? Alaric suddenly erupted, roaring as he smashed the vase and inkstone on the table. Seraphina knelt there, unmoving as a mountain, and suddenly laughed. Her laugh was somewhat mocking. General Sterling, a woman, achieved such illustrious military merits, winning so much renown for your empire. For so many years, you didn't spare her a shred of affection, only realizing your regret after she died on the battlefield. Your Majesty, do you love a person, or this fox fur cloak? Her words struck Alaric's heart like a heavy hammer. He staggered back 2 steps, his face a mask of horrified exposure. Seraphina no longer found him fearsome. Instead, he seemed rather laughable. As far as I know, for all these years, you have not taken a wife, nor had a child. Yet you have kept General Sterling imprisoned by your side from beginning to end. You dared to summon her and dismiss her at will, simply because you knew General Sterling would never abandon you. Your Majesty, oh your Majesty, have you ever, for even a moment, seen your own heart clearly? As she spoke these words, Seraphina knew that the outcome awaiting her was certain death, yet she felt an immense sense of relief. This man sat securely on his throne, ruling over a boundless empire. He was the lord of a peaceful and prosperous land, to whom all people would come to kowtow. He would hear the cheers of "Long live your Majesty, 10,000 years," but he would never again hear someone call him Alaric in a sweet and gentle voice. No matter how great his power, no matter how many troops he commanded, he could never get his beloved back. But what Seraphina hadn't expected was that Alaric didn't have her dragged away and executed. He merely sent her home. That day, he dismissed all the servants in the temporary palace and sat on the floor for a long, long time, clutching the fox fur cloak. If anyone had been beside him, they would have heard Alaric murmuring, "So, I did love her." He loved Astrid, which was why he felt such heart-wrenching pain upon hearing of her death. He loved Astrid, which was why he remained unmoved even when Seraphina was at her most alluring. He choked, unable to speak, as overwhelming regret surged through him like a tidal wave. It was he who had forced Astrid to attack Chi, causing her to lead troops into battle at such a turbulent time. He was the one who had caused Astrid's ruin. Chapter 15, Claiming illness and neglecting affairs of state, Alaric Windsor walked alone on the mountain path to Lan Yin Monastery. This time, he hadn't alerted anyone, so pilgrims thronged the path. Alaric walked aimlessly, thinking, when Astrid came here, did she see these same sights? Among the bustling crowd, young couples snuggled together, writing wishes for a lifetime companionship on red ribbons. There were those holding children, teasing them, requesting blessings from the monks in the monastery. There were those dressed as scholars, writing down their aspirations for high honors. The myriad forms of human life, vivid and real. Alaric suddenly understood why Astrid had been reluctant to go to war. Every war meant conscription, and conscription didn't care who was someone's husband, someone's father, or someone's child. They all had their own families, their own bright futures. But once the horns of war sounded, they might be separated by life and death, never to meet again. It was an exceedingly cruel thing. The Alaric of the past hadn't realized how much suffering his impulsive actions would bring to so many families. But Astrid, on the very front lines of war, understood better than anyone the meaning of "a general's success is built on 10,000 bones." She did not covet fame or fortune. Moreover, in every battle, she minimized casualties. She saw their flesh and blood, their pain. That was why she tossed and turned through countless sleepless nights. Alaric's eyes were bloodshot. He knelt before the Buddha, his forehead pressed against the Buddhist scriptures on the incense table, praying over and over again. Please transfer all of Astrid's karmic debts from killing onto me, he thought silently. She wielded the blade for me, I should bear all this for her. A cool breeze swept through the hall, causing the red candles to flicker. Alaric looked up and saw Master Silas standing nearby. Unlike his previous disdain, Alaric bowed to him. Master Silas did not evade it, accepting it calmly. His expression was much like the Buddha's, serene and compassionate. Seeing Alaric without attendance, he didn't reveal his identity, only saying softly, "Patron, it has been a month since we last met. Are you well?" Alaric lowered his eyes, his expression filled with an irresolvable pain. "Master, I am not well." Master Silas remained devoid of joy or sorrow, his palms together. "Patron, please follow me." He seemed to see through everything, letting out a very light sigh. "Master, I have lost someone very, very precious." "She is dead," Alaric murmured. Master Silas said, "Are you speaking of a valiant lady patron, dressed in dark robes? She used to come to pay homage almost every year." "Yes, she is General, Defender of the Realm, Astrid Sterling." Alaric smiled bitterly. "Every year she begged me to come, but I never agreed." Master Silas sighed. "Your karmic bond with General Sterling was too shallow. Since she has passed away, patron, do not grieve excessively. The dead cannot be revived." Alaric was silent for a long while, his eyes so red they seemed about to drip blood. He looked imploringly at Master Silas. "Is there any way to make things better for Astrid? By hanging banners and canopies, lighting oil lamps, reciting revered scriptures, or making offerings to Buddha statues and images of saints. Even by reciting the names of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Pratyekabuddhas, so that each name and title reaches the ear of the dying person, or is heard in their fundamental consciousness. The evil karma created by these beings, when calculated for its resultant fruit, would surely lead them to fall into evil realms. Because these relatives cultivate such holy causes for the dying person, all such sins are extinguished." Master Silas said, "You may recite the sutras for the departed for her. General Sterling accumulated heavy killing karma in her lifetime. If she wishes to be reincarnated as a human in the cycle of rebirth, a living person must perform 49 deep bows for her." Master Silas had mentioned it casually, but seeing the emperor lift his robes and kneel, bowing without hesitation, he still sighed and shook his head. It was all karmic debt. Chapter 16, Alaric Windsor left a red wishing ribbon, on which he wrote, "If there is a next life, I still wish to meet you." Heavy rain fell as he returned to the palace. The bluestone path was slippery, and he stumbled, the weather in the mountains changing abruptly, with rumbles of thunder. He remembered Astrid, who would always burrow into his quilt whenever it thundered, and he smiled. It was he who was actually afraid of thunder. He would tremble on the bed, the thunderous noise penetrating even through the quilt, lightning momentarily illuminating the room. Alaric, peeking out slightly, would see a figure standing beside him. Terrified out of his wits, his scream would be muffled before it could escape. A warm palm calloused Astrid's hand. She would grin, take off her shoes and socks, climb onto the bed, push Alaric to the inner side, and say brazenly, "The thunder is too loud tonight, I want to sleep next to you." They were half-grown children then, naturally understanding the principle that men and women should not share a bed. Alaric's face, pale with fright, gradually flushed with a shy red. Astrid, however, pinched Alaric's cheek hard. "What are you thinking, you little rascal?" That day, he slept exceptionally soundly. Waking up to clear skies and crisp autumn air, the rain having washed the sky a brilliant blue, he was never again afraid of thunder. Alaric's clothes and hair were soaked through by the rain. The storm was too fierce. He began to lose his sense of direction. The mountain path was rugged, but in the middle of it, a tall, slender female figure appeared. She was dressed in dark robes, her ponytail tied high, seemingly also hurrying down the mountain. Alaric recognized her at a glance. It was Astrid. He stumbled as he ran downwards, the name he blurted out swallowed by the wind and rain. He had no mind to wonder why Astrid would appear here, only knowing he had to run forward. "Don't leave me." His voice was already hoarse, tears mixing with rainwater, hot and cold streaks on his face. Astrid, my star, wait for me. A gap suddenly appeared in the stone slabs. Alaric missed his footing, his head striking the sharp edge of a step, and he fainted instantly. His eyes, pelted by the rain, couldn't open, yet he stubbornly stared at the gradually receding figure. The hand he had extended, hoping someone would grasp it tightly, eventually fell limply to the ground. When Alaric awoke, he saw familiar furnishings. His heart filled with ashes of despair, he turned over, knowing he had probably been rescued by a passerby and sent back to the palace. The Astrid he saw on the road was merely a figment of his imagination. But what about the one lying beside him? He gasped for breath, reaching to touch the back of his head, almost believing this was a hallucination brought on by his injury. Perhaps his movement was too large. The woman awoke from a restless sleep. A pair of clear, almond-shaped eyes narrowed lazily, then saw his shocked expression. After a long pause, she said, "I will bring Serafina Beaumont back safely. Please rest assured, Your Majesty." Her naked body still bore faint kiss marks, yet she spoke of the woman her beloved adored without any resentment, even though the sourness in her heart was almost unbearable. She still managed to maintain a peaceful expression. Alaric watched her back as she dressed, then reached out, stunned, to touch the conspicuous red marks on her spine. "Astrid, what is this?" Astrid Sterling smiled faintly. "Your Majesty, these are the lashes from the military cane you bestowed upon your servant." 30 full strokes, which had kept her bedridden for half a month, and the day after tomorrow, she was to set out for the northern frontier to fight. She felt that today's emperor was somewhat strange. The next moment, he pulled her into an embrace, the force of it nearly taking her breath away. But Astrid didn't feel pain. She yearned for this warmth. Even knowing Alaric was infatuated with another, she didn't care because she loved him. But gradually, hot liquid seeped through her nightgown, easily scalding her skin. Astrid wondered if the newly healed skin was too tender, otherwise why would a few tears completely break her down? Just before falling asleep, she had looked at Alaric's satiated profile and told herself not to be greedy. Having had this brief moment of tenderness was enough. Chapter 17, when Alaric Windsor released her, the traces of tears were gone from his face, though his eyes were red and swollen. He was clearly an emperor in his prime, yet Astrid Sterling still found him pitiful and endearing. Aside from finally being able to welcome his beloved into the palace, she couldn't guess what else might make Alaric cry. Her heart was exceptionally bitter, yet she forced a smile. "Does Your Majesty not trust me? Not a hair on Serafina Beaumont's head will be harmed." Alaric, however, straightened up at this moment, looking at her earnestly. "Astrid, I have decided, we will not attack the northern frontier." Astrid was stunned. The army was already assembled, even the supplies were amply prepared. Although Astrid indeed disagreed with this campaign, she couldn't help but feel Alaric was being far too willful. She frowned. "Your Majesty, how will you explain this to the civil and military officials?" "We are not fighting," Alaric said, word by word. "Anyone who objects will be executed." "Addie, I don't care about the opinions of the officials. I only care about you." Alaric's heart pounded like a drum. He ignored Astrid's surprised gaze and expression, solely focused on touching her warm skin, repeatedly confirming that he had truly returned to the time before Astrid's expedition. He had actually obtained a chance to live again at Lanyin Monastery. Then, no matter what, he would not let Astrid put herself in danger again. Astrid, unaware of the reasons, was merely worried that Alaric's capricious decisions would lead to criticism from the court officials. For a moment, she frowned slightly in distress. "Your Majesty, but Lady Serafina is still in Chi, and she is suffering greatly," Astrid said, trying to persuade him after much thought. "Does Your Majesty intend to abandon the plan to rescue her as well?" As Astrid spoke these words, it felt as if she were repeatedly cutting her own organs with a blunt knife. She still remembered Alaric's relaxed and joyful smile when he mentioned Serafina's name, and the 30 lashes she had received when he ordered the attack on Chi. It hurt so much that she could no longer deceive herself about how important Serafina Beaumont must be to Alaric. Alaric thought for a moment, then said softly, "Serafina must be rescued." A pang of pain shot through Astrid's heart, but as she listened to Alaric's next words, she grew increasingly bewildered. "Chancellor Beaumont is a loyal minister. When the late emperor was alive, our dynasty was weak, and there were no princesses in the palace. Lady Seraphina voluntarily offered to marry in place of a princess. Now that she is suffering, if we can rescue her, we naturally should. Seeing Astrid's wide, bewildered eyes, Alaric found her straightforwardness adorable and couldn't resist leaning in to kiss her slightly parted lips. Astrid Addie? His voice was so low, gently calling Astrid by the nickname no one had used for her in over a decade. I do not love Seraphina. You can rest assured. Astrid felt as if she were living in a dream. The Alaric of the past would also use such gentle coaxing to achieve his goals. Every time, even knowing it was mere manipulation, she had been willingly ensnared. But this time, Alaric was explaining things to her and even said he didn't love Seraphina. Having been deceived too many times, Astrid, of course, wouldn't believe him. She was immersed in that sweetness for only a short while before waking up, her thoughts growing even more bitter. Alaric must think she would be jealous of Seraphina, so he made up this excuse to ensure she would rescue Seraphina without any distractions. Daughter of a loyal minister, noble and principled, understanding the greater good. Alaric knew her too well. To risk her life for such a woman, Astrid indeed had no complaints. Chapter 18. Astrid Stirling did not disband the army. Instead, she had them prepare for deployment. Although Alaric Windsor repeatedly said he wanted to postpone the war until after the new year, at least until the court stabilized before making further plans, facing the unpredictable Imperial will, she couldn't relax the taut string in her heart. Alaric saw this and could only smile bitterly. His past record was so poor, how could he have the face to ask Astrid to let down her guard? However, neither of them anticipated that many eyes in the court were still fixed, enus amount of money price. This seems like a typo in the original text. It should be firmly or intently, which I've translated as such on Astrid and the military tally in her hand. With 100,000 troops poised outside the capital, Astrid's gaze in the golden audience hall was intense. If not for the older minister's patience, they would have almost jumped out to shout that Astrid was planning a rebellion. Alaric, however, harbored no suspicion at all. Astrid had countless opportunities to kill him. Moreover, at this point, if she wanted to kill him, he would only offer his neck. He owed Astrid too many lives. What did it matter if she took his? Besides, his Astrid was such a loyal, gentle, and people-minded general. That day, after court, he had no intention of even listening to the memorials on state affairs and directly followed Astrid back to the Jade Pavilion. Passing by the chestnut tree that had borne some fruit, Alaric chuckled lightly. Addie, would you like some chestnut cake? Astrid, too preoccupied to correct his form of address, her eyes lit up. I thought you had long forgotten. Alaric's martial skills were on par with hers, but he lacked common sense, completely unaware that the delicious chestnuts were encased in spiky burrs. After leaping to the treetop with his lightness skill, the moment he reached out to pick them, his fingers were pricked and began to bleed. He jumped down, dejected. Seeing Astrid grinning from ear to ear, his mood improved considerably. He no longer cared about the pain, offering his hand to her and saying softly, Addie, it hurts. Astrid had never seen him in such a vulnerable state. For a moment, she found him both pitiful and amusing, and blew on his wound with unrestrained laughter. There's medicinal powder for wounds in the Jade Pavilion. She pursed her lips, another smile escaping. Your Majesty, don't be so greedy next time, lest you injure your imperial person. Lucy was sweeping fallen leaves in the courtyard. Seeing Alaric dressed in dark robes embroidered with a 5-clawed golden dragon, she knew his identity even without having met him before. Her legs went weak, and she quickly knelt. Long live your Majesty, then, timidly clutching the corner of her robe, she looked up at Astrid. General, you're back. With that, she scurried into her own room like a frightened rabbit. Alaric said, puzzled, Why does this little maidservant of yours seem so unfamiliar with you? Addie, you don't usually bully her for amusement, do you? Astrid laughed for a good while before straightening up. She's never seen a stranger before, so she got scared. Besides, in private, Lucy never calls me General. This was news to Alaric. For so many years, he had only called Astrid by her full name, only recently starting to call her Addie. He couldn't help feeling a twinge of jealousy. Does the little lass call you by a nickname then? So it's not that she's distant with you, but that you're distant with me? Astrid never expected him to get jealous from this angle. she said helplessly. She's quite a bit younger than me. She's a young servant I knew from the general's manor, so I simply let her call me Sis Addie. As soon as she finished speaking, Alaric, without blinking, called her name, Sis Addie. Her face instantly flushed crimson. Astrid was indeed 2 months older than Alaric, so when Alaric was younger, he had also called Astrid sister. But his voice now was far different from the tender tones of his youth. When a mature man with a deep, rich voice seriously called her sister, it carried an extra layer of flirtation. Astrid's forehead throbbed. Her voice became noticeably weaker, and she turned her face away, unwilling to look at him. "Don't call me that." Chapter 19, Sis Addie, Alaric pressed on, leaning closer to her ear, his voice a low whisper. "Can I call you that in bed too?" He had even dropped the royal we. Astrid, forced back a step by him, felt the blush on her cheeks spread all the way to her earlobes. She was dizzy with happiness. Her fingers, which had intended to push Alaric away, instinctively clutched his lapel. Behind her was the stone table where she often sat drinking tea with Lucy. Astrid was pressed against the stone table and kissed for a long time. The man's kiss, unlike the impatient ones of the past meant to vent desire, was instead incredibly patient, gently sipping at her lips, his tenderness almost drowning Astrid. She panted softly, looking into Alaric's eyes so close to hers, and said shyly, shall we go back to the room?" Alaric suddenly burst into laughter. "Addie, what are you thinking? We haven't even had dinner yet." Astrid's face turned even redder than before. The Jade Pavilion was, after all, remote, and it was merely the old cold palace given a new name. Astrid living there, though free, was also in simple and austere conditions. Alaric, without a second thought, was about to order servants to add furnishings, but Astrid stopped him. She lowered her sharp, almond-shaped eyes, looking so serene. "Your Majesty, it is already unconventional for me, as a court official, to reside deep within the palace. If your Majesty were to treat me with such lavish courtesy, how could I maintain my reputation in court? The fewer people who know about this, the better. Let's not make a big fuss." Her tone was calm, the unspoken grievances in her words lightly brushed aside, unwilling even to cause Alaric the slightest embarrassment. So many years of dedication, such illustrious achievements, had not earned her a grand mansion or thousands of gold pieces. When Alaric had previously asked her what she wanted, Astrid never boasted of her military merits, only saying she wished for a place to live within the palace. On the day of his enthronement, she had stood in the crowd, looking up at the man in imperial yellow robes, as if she were an ordinary subject with no connection to him. Alaric's heart ached with a slight spasm. He cupped Astrid's cheek and kissed it tenderly. "Addie, I will never fail you." Those words were so sweet, yet Astrid merely smiled faintly, showing no hint of complaint. Her mind was clear, her eyes bright. "Your Majesty is a rare blessing for the land and its people. If you govern diligently, peace and prosperity are within reach," Alaric sighed. He had heard too much official speak, too much flattery. Though he could tell that Astrid was genuinely praising him now, he felt both joy and frustration. His Addie had suffered too much. She had lost the ability to trust. "I don't want to hear this." Alaric kissed his way from her cheek to her lips, his sharp lip line now softened into a gentle demeanor. "Addie, are you hungry? Shall we eat?" Lucy had prepared the ingredients and was busy in the small kitchen. Astrid picked some light dishes. She was accustomed to doing things herself, especially when cooking for Alaric. But this man was truly strange today. Instead of admiring the fine autumn scenery, he insisted on following her into the kitchen and causing trouble. Lucy, already flushed red with embarrassment by their stickiness, had fled back to her room. With no outsiders present, Alaric became even more unrestrained, pressing close to Astrid. "Your Majesty, a gentleman stays away from the kitchen." Astrid racked her brains to recall this saying, sternly pushing away Alaric, who was holding her. "I am enough here." Alaric smiled faintly. "Addie, a gentleman stays away from the kitchen means that having seen an animal alive, he cannot bear to see it killed. Having heard its cries, he cannot bear to eat its flesh. Today, all you are making are light vegetarian dishes, without any meat. Even a gentleman wouldn't mind." His tone was gentle, speaking slowly. Astrid, a warrior who had never liked the pedantry of poetry and books, listened with rapt attention. In reality, Astrid felt he was being too much of a hindrance. She worried about injuring his Imperial person even when turning to grab a kitchen knife. How could Astrid voice her true thoughts? She could only finish cooking the meal with a blush on her face. Chapter 20. It was late autumn, and many wild mushrooms and fungi sprouted overnight in the mountains and fields. Astrid Sterling, during her military campaigns, would occasionally gather and eat them. Distinguishing poisonous ones was child's play for her. Although her culinary skills were unremarkable, the freshness of the ingredients made the meal quite delicious. Because Alaric Windsor had been frequently causing a ruckus in the kitchen, it was already moonrise by the time they had their evening meal. Astrid grumbled softly, "If you hadn't been pestering me, we could have rested by now." Alaric raised an eyebrow slightly. Seeing his teasing expression, Astrid realized she had misspoken. They had just joked about going back to the room earlier, and now, bringing it up again, her face instantly felt like it was on fire. She didn't know what was wrong with her. They had shared intimate nights countless times before, yet today she found herself blushing frequently. Perhaps the moonlight was too bright, or perhaps her beloved's eyes were too gentle. The mushroom soup and side dishes were almost finished. She bit her lip. "Are you staying here tonight?" Alaric paused, then nodded. "All right." It was his first time staying overnight in the Jade Pavilion. It was as Spartan as he had seen in his previous life. Astrid, noticing his appraising gaze, her eyes dimmed slightly. "It's indeed not very comfortable to sleep here. Perhaps it's better to return to the Sovereign's Hall." Alaric, however, grasped her hand tightly and smiled. "It's very good here. It is Addie's scent." He spoke the truth. Astrid always carried a faint medicinal fragrance, perhaps related to her frequent injuries on campaigns. This room, having been inhabited by her for years, had acquired a unique scent on the bed. Astrid, however, couldn't smell it at all and merely thought he was teasing her. A single, dim candle flickered in the room. Astrid had just removed her outer robe when Alaric pulled her firmly into his embrace. He lightly kissed the prominent scar below her neck, the glaring claw marks on her arm, every mark a testament to what Astrid had once sacrificed for him. Astrid's eyes grew moist. She could feel Alaric's unspoken tenderness. "Does he truly love me?" Astrid thought hazily on the verge of sleep. If only he truly loved me. In the middle of the night, Alaric was awakened by the sound of crying. Astrid, beside him, was pressing against his shoulder, her own shoulders shaking with sobs. Astrid rarely cried in front of him, let alone in such a pitiful state. He was about to ask what was wrong when he realized Astrid was crying with her eyes closed, her brow deeply furrowed, murmuring in her sleep, "Don't go, don't go." He remembered Lucy saying she often had nightmares after seeing blood. He hadn't expected that little bit under the chestnut tree today would count. Alaric's chest ached so much he could barely breathe. Once again, he regretted making Astrid commit so many killings for him. But this time, Astrid wasn't murmuring the names of those she had killed. Her expression was one of extreme pain, tears streaming down her face. "Alaric, don't go." Alaric was profoundly shaken. He disregarded everything else, bending down to embrace the trembling Astrid, his large hand gently patting her shoulder, whispering softly, "Addie, I'm here. I won't go." Unexpectedly, the person in his arms gradually opened her eyes, a pair of orbs washed clear and bright by tears, staring fixedly at him. Alaric, looking at her, felt his heart sour and soften. He cooed as if to a child, soothing the fear in her heart. "Addie, what did you dream about?" "I dreamt that on this campaign, I died tragically on the battlefield." Astrid's voice was so hoarse, a touch of pain in her expression. "I dreamt that you made Serafina Beaumont your empress." She began to weep softly. Alaric listened, stunned, his hand trembling as he covered her with the quilt, forcing a smile. "Addie, dreams are false. Go back to sleep." Chapter 21. Astrid Sterling murmured a few more words and fell back into a deep sleep, but Alaric Windsor could no longer rest. His heart was filled with dread, wishing he could go to Lan Yin Monastery again. He had painstakingly obtained this chance to make amends for the harm Astrid had suffered, and only wished that the passing gods and Buddhas would favor him once more. The image of Astrid from his past life, covered in blood, was still vivid and unforgettable. He gently brushed aside the sweat-dampened hair from the person beside him and kissed her cheek. Just give him a little more time. Alaric looked at Astrid's sleeping profile, his heart aching dully. Just give him a little more time to love Astrid, to atone for his mistakes. The next day was a rest day, no need for early morning court. Alaric had watched Astrid almost all night, only managing to fall asleep towards dawn. When he awoke, Astrid was already dressed and sitting at the stone table. Today, she again wore dark robes, her hair tied back in its usual high ponytail, but her expression was heavy, seemingly burdened with many worries. Alaric touched her cheek, his voice gentle. "Addie, why the furrowed brow?" Astrid forced a slight smile, still looking preoccupied. She toyed with the tea set in her hands and sighed softly. "That dream last night felt so real, I can't seem to forget it. I'm not acquainted with that highborn lady from a prestigious family. We only met once many years ago. Apart from remembering her stunning beauty, we had little interaction, but in the dream, her appearance was so clear. Alaric, is there any logic to this? Could it be that she and I share some special fate?" She even tried to say something lighthearted to amuse Alaric, but when her gaze fell upon him, she was suddenly startled. He looked entirely devoid of his earlier ease. His lips deathly pale, even his eyes had lost their luster, and he trembled as if in pain. Astrid quickly stepped forward to support him, her touch met with cold sweat. Alaric sat down, dizzy and disoriented. Just as Astrid was thinking of pouring him some hot water, he pulled her back. "Addie," he seemed to have lost his way, for a moment only able to call her name helplessly, his voice almost a whisper in the dirt. "Addie, if I made a mistake, could you forgive me?" Astrid, unaware of the intricacies of the past life, laughed helplessly. "Haven't you made few mistakes? When we were children, it was always me who took the beatings for you. Do you still remember that demerit system?" She was referring to a rule set by their childhood tutor, who graded the Imperial Academy students as A, B, C, or D based on their daily performance. Alaric, of course, remembered, nodding with an almost imperceptible movement. "We'll do as the tutor did. If you do something wrong, I'll deduct points. If you get a D, I'll leave you alone in the capital." Alaric said gloomily, "Where will you go?" "You just be a good emperor here in the palace." Astrid's eyes curved into crescents, completely unlike her usual stern demeanor. "I'll guard the borders for you." Alaric still pressed against her back. Since there were state affairs to attend to the next day, Alaric brought Astrid back to the sovereign's hall. Red candles cast warm shadows, the wind swayed gently. That night, he seemed to sense something, ceaselessly murmuring Astrid's name, tossing and turning, speaking all sorts of nonsense. Astrid, exhausted from his attentions on the bed, still half closed her eyes and soothingly stroked the back of Alaric's neck. She wasn't used to soft beds. Years of military campaigns had taken a toll on her body, most evident in her back. The soft bedding couldn't support the aching muscles of the young general. On every night after their intimacy, she would gaze at the soundly sleeping Alaric, then turn over and sleep on the roof beams. It was spacious and sturdy there. Only when dawn was about to break would Astrid return to the bed. This night was like any other. After Alaric fell asleep, Astrid went up to the roof beams. She pillowed her head on her arm, repeatedly pondering the overly realistic scenes from her dream. But now, Alaric was not only unwilling to go to war, but also treated her so well. Chapter 22, in the middle of the night, she heard a rustling sound from the bed. Just as she was about to jump down to investigate, she heard Alaric's rapid breathing. He didn't even have time to put on his shoes, running barefoot towards the hall entrance, choking out, "Addie, Addie?" Head eunuch Miles was keeping watch outside the hall. Alaric's disheveled and panicked appearance nearly scared the old eunuch out of his wits. He quickly supported him. "Your Majesty, what's wrong with you?" Alaric, as if grasping a lifeline, clutched his wrist tightly, asking in a terrified voice, "What is the current reign title?" Replying to Your Majesty, it is currently the 4th year of the Verdant era. He finally calmed down, letting out a long sigh of relief. Astrid's posthumous enfeoffment was in the 5th year of the Verdant era. He remembered it all too clearly. His sigh of relief came too soon. He turned his head and saw Astrid, dressed in a snow-white nightgown, emerge from the darkness, her gaze like lightning, piercing straight into his heart. "Your Majesty," her voice was very soft, "how could you be so muddled from sleep as to forget even the reign title?" Alaric opened his mouth but could find no explanation. He cautiously reached for Astrid's hand. Astrid didn't struggle, allowing him to take her hand. Head eunuch Miles, knowing this was not something he could interfere with, quietly closed the hall doors. For a moment, only the sound of a candlewick sputtering remained. Astrid pulled his hand, took a step back, and without looking back, walked to the side of the bed. Though she wasn't very familiar with this place, she bent down and fumbled for a moment, then hooked a latch. With a gentle pull, the mechanism clicked, and scrolls of paintings unfurled before her eyes. Astrid's eyes trembled. Completely ignoring Alaric's attempts to stop her, she gritted her teeth and shook the scrolls open. A lifelike beauty leaped from the paper. Her eyebrows were like new moons, her cheeks tinged with a faint pink. Even if the freehand brushwork couldn't capture her full beauty, it conveyed at least 8/10 of it. Astrid recognized her at a glance. It was the Chancellor's daughter, Serafina Beaumont. She studied it, the corners of her mouth lifting slightly in a somewhat mocking smile. What a fine portrait of a beauty. Kept by his side day and night, hidden under his pillow. Presumably, whenever he missed her, he would gaze upon it to alleviate his longing. Alaric's face turned deathly pale. The evidence was irrefutable. He had previously mistaken himself for loving Serafina and had been mistaken for so many years. Words of explanation felt feeble and useless. Alaric only wanted to step forward and embrace Astrid, but Astrid merely slammed the scrolls fiercely to the ground, crystalline tears sliding from her eyes. I originally thought that dream was just a figment of my imagination, but I never expected it to be a revelation from heaven. Alaric Windsor, you are despicable when have I, Astrid Sterling, ever refused your requests. Yet, to rescue Serafina Beaumont, you deceived me, lied to me for so long. You can even feign your love. How laughable, Alaric's lips trembled. He wanted to say, the only one I love is you, or Astrid, it was you who saved me back then, wasn't it? But Astrid left him with only a resolute retreating figure. Before leaving, she turned her face, the anger in her eyes already gone, replaced by a deep weariness. She said, Your Majesty, I will undoubtedly go and bring Serafina Beaumont back for you, but this time, I wish to ask Your Majesty for a reward. If I succeed this time, I beg Your Majesty to banish this servant to the border, never to return to the capital. If I die, bury me in the northern frontier as well. This servant has long been without parents. There is nothing left in this place worth lingering for. And just like that, Astrid left. Most of the military power in the court was already in her hands. Since the army had assembled half a month ago, the soldiers were all prepared and waiting for their commander's orders. Not even Alaric could stop her decision. Chapter 23, the journey on campaign was exceptionally arduous. Astrid Sterling's heart was filled with an anger she couldn't vent. Her innate nature made her reluctant to be harsh with her soldiers, so she could only ride at the very front each day. She hadn't actually gleaned many heavenly secrets from her dream. Scattered memories and intense pain crowded her mind, and she could recall very little. That night, it was merely because she saw Alaric Windsor's strange reaction, combined with the contents of her dream, that she came to realize. Over a decade of shared knowledge and companionship couldn't compare to love at first sight. Everything was but an illusion, a mirage. Alaric would not love her. She held back tears, charging at the forefront. Vice General Charles Charlie Quillen quickly caught up, his voice carrying far. General, beyond this forest lies a long river, don't charge any further. For a fleeting moment, Astrid wanted to let the river carry her away. But behind her was an army of 100,000. Even if she could abandon herself, she couldn't forsake her responsibility to this host of people. She took a deep breath, casually wiped the tear stains from her face, and said to Charlie, "Relay my orders. We will make camp nearby tonight." Charlie nodded. They lit bonfires, preparing to cross the river the next day. Out of consideration for the soldiers' well-being, Astrid hadn't intended to rush on this journey, merely advancing and resting intermittently to conserve stamina. Although the northern frontier wasn't as cold as the capital, the wind and sand were extreme. Along the way, they didn't need to worry about the sound of horses' hooves. The vice-general's tent was pitched close to the commander's. Charlie looked at Astrid's pale, gaunt face, worriedly saying, "General, so many letters have been sent from the palace. Are you really not going to reply?" Astrid shifted the rabbit leg roasting over the fire and silently shook her head. She had come this far with great difficulty. Why should she be tethered by Alaric again? Since she had fulfilled his wish, the letters were likely filled with more of his presumptuous reassurances and sweet nothings, as untrustworthy as his previous honeyed words. Droplets of oil fell onto the fire, bursting into small sparks. The rabbit leg, roasted by the flames, sent a fragrant aroma wafting into their nostrils. Charlie was practically drooling. He was so familiar with Astrid that he reached out to snatch her food. Normally, he would have earned a beating by now, but today Astrid yielded it without blinking. This made Charlie suspect the sun had risen in the west. Astrid's complexion was truly poor. He, in turn, didn't dare to snatch it anymore, holding the branch towards her. "General, you eat it," the smell of meat assailed her nostrils. Astrid's face instantly turned pale. She turned her head away, suppressing the urge to vomit, and said in a muffled voice, "Take it away quickly, or you won't be eating any meat on this entire journey." Charlie pouted and casually pulled out some wild fruits he had picked in the forest. These fruits weren't poisonous, just so sour that most people couldn't eat them. He had intended to tease Astrid, but unexpectedly, after smelling them, she opened her mouth and ate one. Charlie was so shocked he took a fruit and bit into it, thinking he had mistaken the variety. But the moment it entered his mouth, the sourness was so intense it nearly made his face pucker into a knot. Astrid, seeing his expression, finally laughed. Charlie rinsed his mouth by the stream, grumbling, "If you weren't unmarried, I'd think you were pregnant, General. To trick me into eating something so sour, you really hid it well." The speaker was careless, but the listener took heed. Charlie, being outside the palace, naturally didn't know the royal secrets, but Astrid's expression suddenly turned cold, and she touched her lower abdomen. She remembered so many nights spent in intimate embrace with Alaric and couldn't help but smile bitterly. "If I truly am pregnant, then this child has come at a most inopportune time." Chapter 24, beyond the river that snaked past the forest lay the territory of the northern frontier. They had rested for a night, and just as they were about to cross, Astrid Sterling saw someone who should not possibly be there. Head eunuch Miles, though an eunuch, had spent his years deep within the palace and had rarely endured hardship. Days of continuous travel had rubbed the insides of his thighs raw and bloody. It was utterly agonizing. The moment he saw Astrid, the old eunuch nearly shed tears, his face a mask of woeful complaint. "Yo, my little ancestor, great general, you truly travel fast, 1,000 miles a day, is it?" Astrid felt somewhat embarrassed and quickly helped him sit down in the camp to rest his hands and feet. The old eunuch, having caught his breath, finally began to speak of serious matters. "General Sterling, the day you set out on the campaign, you had a terrible argument with His Majesty. It caused quite a disaster in the capital, you know." Even though Astrid had resolved to sever all ties with Alaric Windsor, the heart that had beaten for him for a full decade was not so easily calmed. A dull, wrenching pain gripped her as she listened to head eunuch Miles continue in his high-pitched voice. "You led the army and waited outside the city walls for over half a month, and rumors that you were rebelling began to circulate faintly in the court, but His Majesty never believed any of it, and he never once actively questioned you. His Majesty's heart is as clear as the sun and moon. General Sterling, why are you unwilling to even glance at those letters?" Astrid gave a bitter smile and shook her head. Some words, some matters, could not be spoken to outsiders. She could only console head eunuch Miles, who had traveled so far. "Thank you for delivering the message. The weather is getting colder. Head eunuch, please be careful on your journey back to the capital." Head eunuch Miles nodded. He solemnly took out a small object wrapped in yellow brocade from his inner pocket, placed it in Astrid's palm, and said in a low voice, "His Majesty sympathizes with your day and night journey and is even more worried that you are isolated and helpless out here. His situation in court is much like yours now. For convenience, he specifically asked me to pass this to you." Astrid unwrapped the cloth and saw a well-crafted jade seal nestled inside. Her pupils contracted. She immediately recognized it as a lesser Imperial seal. Carved from the same piece of jade as the Imperial hereditary seal beside it was a note, in Alaric's familiar handwriting. "You do not wish to see me, and I have no time to be distracted. There is much turmoil in court, perhaps sending you away is safer. Addie, I think of you, I miss you, and I know even more that I have hurt your heart. Since you have already given that jade pendant to Lucy, do not give away this jade seal so easily. Seeing this is like seeing me. Addie, I love you." His words were direct, but his handwriting was indeed messy, likely written in a hurry. Astrid's eyes reddened slightly. She stubbornly believed Alaric was only acting this way to coax her into rescuing Serafina Beaumont. Whenever her heart wavered slightly, she would recall the hidden compartment she had pulled out from under the bed that day, filled with Serafina's portraits. How could this make her believe? Head eunuch Miles was old. Delivering this item should not have fallen to him. But the lesser imperial seal was of great importance, and he was Alaric's most trusted courtier. Astrid escorted him on horseback to a relatively safe inhabited village, spent some silver to hire a carriage, and sent him back to the capital. She returned to the camp alone. Charlie Quillen sat beside her, watching her repeatedly fidget with the small cloth bundle, and sighed deeply. Charlie asked curiously, "Is there someone even you can't handle?" Astrid pointed upwards. "Can you handle him? If so, I wouldn't mind yielding this general's position to you." She meant the one sitting high in the grand hall. Speaking ill of His Majesty was a capital offense. Although only Charlie and Astrid were present, he still shivered and sheepishly fell silent. Chapter 25. After crossing the river, they soon faced their first battle. Astrid Sterling had always known how cruel war was, but whenever soldiers around her, wearing uniforms identical or different to hers, fell, an inexplicable chill would run down her spine. Yet Astrid also knew that on this battlefield, whoever showed weakness was the one to lose. She was the one who could least afford to retreat. The drums thundered, like a stone stirring 1,000 waves, rousing the soldiers' war cries. The tassels of her crimson spear were soaked red with blood. She flicked the blood from its shaft, her voice carrying far with its full strength. "Men of Dijo, here, charge with me." The woman, in dark attire and silver armor, her long spear whistling through the air, strode over the bodies of enemy soldiers. Not far away, a battle standard, dyed crimson with blood, unfurled in the strong wind, revealing the surname of the commander. Astrid's eyes shone like stars. Though her cheeks were mostly obscured by blood and sweat, her valiant and heroic posture was still evident. She curved her lips into a slight smile and turned to shout. A great victory in this battle. It was almost a unanimous response. Cries of great victory and victory spread across this scorched earth. Inside the commander's tent, the army physician's expression was extremely grave. Beside him, Charlie Quillen's face was also dark as water. Who could have imagined that the seemingly unharmed commander would faint by the campfire? In that instant, Charlie was so scared he nearly lost his wits. Disregarding any distinctions of rank or gender, he picked up Astrid and rushed into the military tent. The flickering firelight illuminated Astrid's sleeping face. Sweat dripped down the army physician's cheeks as he tremblingly cupped his hands. "Vice General, this humble one is untalented, but I absolutely cannot misdiagnose this pulse." The general, she was truly with child. Charlie cut him off coldly. "Understood. Keep your mouth shut. If word gets out, you will be executed without question." The army physician wiped his sweat. "Yes, my lord." He exited the tent, but with a final glance, he seemed to see the stern-faced man holding the general's cold hand, a hint of sorrow on his face. When Astrid awoke, it was already midnight. The fire in the tent had died out, and it was pitch black all around. She knew she had fainted. Seeing that everyone around was resting quietly, with occasional snores from the soldiers, she knew Charlie had arranged everything properly and felt much relieved. Just as she was about to get off the bed, her leg brushed against cold armor and she nearly cried out. Charlie said flatly, "It's me." Astrid sighed in relief, then said angrily, "Why are you sitting by my bed in the middle of the night instead of sleeping? Playing ghosts and goblins, be careful you don't scare your commander to death." Charlie, however, wasn't joking with her. In the darkness, his eyes shone with an astonishing brightness. His childhood nickname was Chuck de Huang, literally, Big Yellow. Astrid used to tease him, calling him a dog. Now, however, he looked like a majestic wolf, albeit one that had lost its spirit. "You're pregnant," Charlie said. "Whose child is it?" Astrid fell silent abruptly. After a long pause, she finally said, "Whose it is doesn't matter. I don't plan on keeping this child." "Chuck, you won't tell, will you?" Charlie sneered. "Do you know what the physician told me? Your body is extremely weak. You may no longer be able to bear children. This might be your last child. Do you really want to abort it?" "Astrid, don't try to fool me. Whose is it?" Astrid subconsciously touched her stomach, her face turning paler by the second. She had taken contraceptive drafts many times in her early years. She never imagined she might have lost the chance to conceive, but this was Alaric's child, of royal blood. If she truly gave birth to the child, she would inevitably be entangled with them again. Charlie, suppressing his anger, took a deep breath and placed the cloth bundle Astrid carried close to her body into her hand. "It's his, isn't it?" "You already know, why do you still ask me?" Astrid turned her head away, tears sliding down. "Charlie, don't force me." He was furious, but looking at Astrid, he felt helpless. He could only put down the lesser Imperial seal and leave, pushing open the tent flap. Chapter 26. After learning Astrid Sterling was pregnant, Charlie Quillen clearly became much quieter. Although he grew reluctant to speak with Astrid, he always ensured she was as comfortable and at ease as possible in every aspect. The softest cushion was placed on her saddle. Food was uniformly roasted until thoroughly cooked before she was allowed to eat. He was like a diligent, uncomplaining servant, attending to Astrid with utmost care. Astrid tried to talk to him, to tell him he didn't need to treat her like fragile glass, but Charlie always found ways to avoid her. Occasionally, soldiers would see him roasting meat for Astrid and joke openly. "Vice General Quillen, stop trying to curry favor with the general. Anyone who didn't know better would think you were doting on your wife." At such times, Charlie would actually curve his lips into a slight smile and retort, "I enjoy it. Is it any of your business to gossip?" Even the slowest person could sense his feelings. Astrid looked at her lower abdomen and gave a bitter smile. What right did she have to accept someone else's love? Astrid finally found an opportunity to talk properly with Charlie. Just as Charlie was about to take 3 steps as 2 to leave, Astrid grabbed his arm. He had the strength to break free but was unwilling. His lips trembled, and finally, a smile tinged with bitterness and exhaustion appeared. The man, over 7 feet tall, stood before the campfire, his pair of bright black eyes staring directly at her. Astrid knew how cruel she was being, yet she steadied her voice. "I don't love Alaric Windsor anymore." As she said this, a dull ache throbbed in her chest, "but I can't fall in love with anyone else either, Charlie." Charlie let out a short laugh. His voice was very hoarse. He patted Astrid's head. At this moment, they were no longer commander and vice general. Charlie seemed to be just an older brother to Astrid. "You heartless little rascal," Charlie said softly. "I waited for you for 5 or 6 years, only to have you snatched away without even knowing it. I'm such a failure." Astrid's eyes reddened. Charlie, on the contrary, smiled. His hands, like Astrid's, bore calluses from years of wielding spears and swords on the battlefield. He gently wiped the tears from Astrid's cheeks and said helplessly, "I'll still wait for you, all right. But you don't need to rush to respond to me. I will always protect you silently, shielding you from all wind and snow." The deeper they ventured into the northern frontier, the harder Astrid found this war to be. Chi was not an unprepared nation, and Alaric Windsor's declaration of war against them had been entirely impulsive. Although they had half a month to recuperate, most of the conscripted soldiers still couldn't adapt to this high-intensity guerrilla warfare. Astrid hadn't had a proper night's sleep in nearly 10 days. Their advantage was ample troops and supplies. Their disadvantage was also these things unwieldy and poorly disciplined. The plains of the northern frontier were prone to strong sandstorms. The new recruits rarely encountered such blinding conditions, and in their panic, it was easiest for the enemy to find a breakthrough. Charlie looked at her reddened eyes and advised her to get some sleep, but Astrid resolutely shook her head. "Among our soldiers, many are still just teenagers. They shouldn't die here, so I dare not slack off for a moment." Charlie knew her stubborn nature and could only sigh. He then issued orders for the centurions of each unit to take the new recruits for training. This was a crucial battle. If they could capture this pass, it would be extremely difficult for Chi to make a comeback later. But in fact, what Alaric wanted was not the territory of Chi, thousands of miles from his own country. What he wanted, from beginning to end, was only Serafina Beaumont. Conquering Chi would be difficult, but negotiating with Chi had a high chance of success. Astrid would occasionally think of Alaric when she woke from dreams in the middle of the night. She had intermittently heard some news from the court. After she led the army on the campaign, the military strength in the capital had weakened, and many vassal princes were stirring restlessly, wanting to take the opportunity to rebel with their own armies. Civil and military officials in the court argued incessantly, while rebels eyed them covetously from outside. Alaric's situation was extremely difficult. So, when she saw him in the military tent, Astrid still thought she was in a dream. Chapter 27. Addie, Alaric Windsor, dressed in brocade robes with a black cloak draped over them, looked weary, but his eyes still held an undeniable longing. He had been waiting anxiously in the commander's tent, and the moment he saw Astrid Sterling lift the curtain and enter, he strode quickly towards her. Charlie, Quillen's face was extremely grim. He stepped in front of Astrid, blocking Alaric. "Your Majesty, the general is covered in filth from the outside. How can she contaminate your Majesty's person?" Alaric froze, seeing Astrid's approving expression. His voice unknowingly dropped. "How could I ever find Addie distasteful? It is only that Addie should not find me so." Astrid's heart softened, but she was unwilling to interact too much with Alaric, lest it shake her resolve to withdraw completely. She turned to Charlie. "Find an empty tent, and prepare washing water and food for His Majesty." Then, she said coolly to Alaric, "The army camp is not like the palace. If the service is inadequate, I ask for your Majesty's understanding." Her attitude towards him and Charlie was completely different. Alaric, of course, could see it. He sized up this vice-general, whom he had only met once in his previous life, and found him to be a man of distinguished appearance and extraordinary martial prowess. An unbearable sourness welled up in his heart. This Charlie Quillen must be in love with Astrid. The way he looked at him was practically shooting sparks. His back teeth were clenched so hard they audibly ground together. And Astrid? Would his Addie fall in love with such a man? Charlie, at this point, cared little whether he was emperor or a prince. Remembering that Alaric had gotten Astrid pregnant and still brought her to the front lines, he almost hated this wise ruler, praised by the common folk. He said bluntly, "Your Majesty, currently all military affairs are being managed in an orderly fashion by the general. Capturing this pass is merely a matter of 10 days or so. Why did you have to travel thousands of miles to come here?" Alaric smiled faintly. "I missed Astrid, so I came." Charlie was choked speechless by his words, staring blankly for a long moment before finally saying, "A gentleman does not stand under a crumbling wall. Your imperial person is precious." "What if you were injured?" Alaric said. "Vice-General Quillen is unaware, but the royal we have practiced martial arts for many years. Though not as formidable as Addie from a family of generals, killing a few shrimp soldiers and crab generals is more than sufficient. If the vice-general does not believe me, then let us have a contest." The soldiers in the camp had no idea that the plainly dressed man before them was the current emperor. Seeing the vice-general, who often chased after the general, and the newcomer who had come for the general, preparing to duel, they momentarily forgot about the tough battle awaiting them tomorrow and all ran over to watch the excitement, cheering and shouting. Astrid also heard the commotion and hurried over. By the time she arrived, Alaric had already removed his cloak and rolled up his sleeves, assuming a stance. Most of his martial arts had been taught by Astrid, who had never held anything back from him. Charlie, seeing these familiar moves, felt a pang of sourness in his heart and quickly fell into a disadvantage. He angrily threw off his outer coat and shouted, "No more, I concede." Astrid rarely saw Charlie at a loss and couldn't help but laugh. She stepped forward and gestured with her palm towards Alaric, who was still catching his breath. "I'll take his place." Charlie was startled, wanting to speak but hesitating. He was worried about the child in Astrid's womb, but saw Astrid discreetly shake her head at him. Alaric, facing the person who had personally taught him martial arts, naturally had no chance of winning. Moreover, his approach was completely different from when he fought Charlie. He didn't dare to fight back at all. The soldiers gradually noticed that they were using the same style, and more importantly, Alaric's drastically different attitude towards Astrid compared to Charlie. They couldn't help but start jeering. Astrid, however, was extremely displeased. Her expression turned ice-cold after Alaric repeatedly went easy on her. She forcefully shoved the man to the ground and said coldly, "Fight properly, you're letting me win. Are you even qualified? The general is truly angry." This was the collective thought of those around. Alaric naturally sensed her anger and dared not be perfunctory anymore. Astrid, seeing he was taking it seriously, finally unleashed her skills. Her movements weren't fast but were exceptionally ruthless and fluid. her internal energy coordinating with her actions, each blow landing solidly on Alaric. Sometimes he could block, other times he struggled, with almost no room to retaliate. The final punch should have landed on his face. Alaric, already unable to lift his arm to block, closed his eyes, awaiting the momentary pain. But the fist whistled past. After a long moment with no further action from Astrid, he opened his eyes. Her tightly clenched fist was stopped right before his nose. A blow like that would, at the very least, cause a nosebleed, or at worst, a broken nasal bone. Yet Astrid's eyes were merely reddened, her moist gaze fixed on him, before she abruptly released her fist. Alaric staggered back 2 steps and fell before the campfire. "Please leave." Astrid turned her head, not looking at him, and said faintly, "I will not see you again next time." Chapter 28. Although the time and developments were not entirely the same as in his previous life, Alaric Windsor dared not gamble. Astrid Sterling had already died once due to his willful actions. How could he let history repeat itself? He lowered his eyes, his handsome face already showing some bruising, looking utterly pitiful. "Addie, just let me stay here. I promise I won't cause you any trouble." Astrid, however, was well aware of the danger of this campaign. Though Alaric wasn't a peerless wise ruler, he fulfilled his duties as a competent emperor. Moreover, the country had just undergone a major change. The people truly couldn't face the internal turmoil of losing their monarch again. If anything happened to Alaric, how could she face her loyal father in the afterlife? She only said, "Is your Majesty so impatient to see Lady Seraphina that you cannot wait even a moment longer?" This sentence was merely intended to force Alaric into a denial, yet it pricked her own heart with a slight pain. But what was most unexpected was that Alaric actually hesitated and then nodded. She, of course, had no way of knowing he was lying to stay here. Bitterness spread from her heart to her limbs, so cold that she shivered in the late autumn wind. "Then your Majesty may do as you please." Astrid's voice was light and airy as she decisively left the tent. Alaric, now consumed with how to save Astrid, his mind in turmoil, failed to notice her unusual state. The next day, the army prepared to set out. The soldiers discovered that their commander was now accompanied by 2 vice-generals. One was the familiar Charlie Quillen, whose face, for some unknown reason, was as dark as if water might drip from it. The other had an unfamiliar face, seemingly the stranger who had won against Vice-General Quillen the previous night, but lost to General Sterling. However, the general's decisions were never to be questioned, and only a ripple of curiosity spread through the army. Charlie looked at Alaric on horseback, almost hating him to death. If this morning, upon discovering this man hadn't left, he was only 5 parts angry. Then when he heard the general order him to protect Alaric, his anger reached 10 parts. Troublesome waste of space, Charlie thought sullenly, completely forgetting his own martial skills were inferior to Alaric's. Banners fluttered, war drums thundered. The great battle was imminent. Alaric, too, experienced the cruelty of war for the first time. He never knew a human body could bleed so much, almost enough to saturate the entire land. His long saber was already blunted from hacking. As he numbly swung his arm, the impact of human flesh against the sharp edge of a weapon, the easy give, and the heart-wrenching screams, created a stark contrast that made him understand why Astrid had nightmares after every sight of blood. His gaze searched through the dense, surging crowd, but he couldn't find the figure in silver battle armor. A sense of foreboding instantly rose in his heart. The general has been captured." Charlie stared blankly at the reporting soldier. The surrounding enemy troops, however, seemed to have heard something and retreated like a tide, making the soldier's voice even clearer. "The general has been captured. The enemy demands negotiations, he says. He requests an audience with the Emperor of Dezhou." A commotion erupted all around. Alaric, high on his horse, his head buzzing, his expression bewildered, met everyone's scrutinizing gaze. Charlie's expression was taut, all color drained from his face. He dismounted, cupped his fist, and knelt on one knee, his voice low. "I beg your Majesty to save the general's life. Your humble servants will do their utmost to ensure your Majesty's safety." Alaric staggered unsteadily off his horse, his hands still trembling from exhaustion. His cheekbones were bruised, his body covered in enemy blood. He said, his voice hollow, "The royal we will negotiate." Vice General Quillen, hear my command. Dispatch 10 centurions to accompany me to the Chi enemy camp and bring the general back. Yes. Chapter 29, Why, even after a second chance, had he failed to change fate? Alaric Windsor's head throbbed with a splitting pain. The envoy from the Chi army was already waiting outside the tent. Seeing him arrive with a small, elite contingent, the envoy showed no objection and smilingly led the way. Charlie Quillen said in a low voice, Your Majesty, be careful in all things. I fear there may be treachery. Alaric composed himself and nodded. Regardless, the most important thing now was to rescue Astrid. In his previous life, he hadn't even had this opportunity. He just couldn't understand how Astrid, with her formidable martial skills, could have fallen into enemy hands. Prince Kalen of Chi sat steadily in his tent. Seeing Alaric arrive, he actually rose to greet him. He was of a similar age to Alaric, but because the Emperor of Chi was old and robust, he had remained only a crown prince. Alaric had no time for pleasantries and got straight to the point. I wonder what conditions the crown prince has for releasing General Sterling back to Dezhou? Dezhou and Chi have always been without enmity. I, Kalen, am rather puzzled as to why your majesty would personally lead an expedition to attack Chi. Prince Kalen said, not minding Alaric's tone, his voice gentle and refined. If Chi has done anything wrong, your majesty may freely point it out. He was so different from the rumors. Charlie was momentarily dazed, then said in a muffled voice, Everyone knows Crown Prince Kalen of Chi is tyrannical. I heard that Lady Seraphina Beaumont, the Chancellor's daughter who was sent in a marriage alliance years ago, suffered greatly in Chi. Prince Kalen feigned sudden understanding, his handsome face showing a hint of grievance. To be honest with your majesty, the marriage alliance was not my wish. Kalen holds no affection for Lady Seraphina, but I have treated her with due courtesy. Where did this rumor originate? His tone abruptly turned cold, even somewhat sinister. Kalen will definitely find this conniving swine who sowed discord between Dezhou and Chi and have him flayed, his bones crushed, and his body torn to pieces. Alaric's heart skipped a beat. He remained silent, knowing that this crown prince of Chi was not as gentle and scholarly as he appeared. Indeed, his changeable and vicious nature could be glimpsed from these very words. He feigned calmness. Since it is a misunderstanding, it is good to have it clarified. The crown prince is a man of passion and learning. Would you be willing to release Dezhou's general? Prince Kalen's eyes lit up. I never imagined your majesty to be such a talent-cherishing individual, risking your imperial person to rescue General Sterling. It is truly a moving tale of sovereign-subject loyalty. General Sterling is so beautiful and highly skilled in martial arts. Kalen was smitten at first sight. Is she betrothed? She is not. A bitter taste filled Alaric's mouth. He truly couldn't understand this prince's erratic behavior, but his intuition told him Prince Kalen was probing for something. Ah, in that case, it is indeed a match made in heaven. Prince Kalen smiled. But your majesty, the Chi army never captured General Sterling. She fainted on the battlefield, nearly perishing under horses' hooves. It was Kalen who stopped the battle and rescued her, even troubling the army physician to treat her. Since General Sterling is not betrothed, this matter, one cannot say if it is good or bad. Your majesty, General Sterling is with child, you know. Alaric felt as if struck by lightning. Charlie was already flustered. Prince Kalen's gaze darted between the two of them, then he suddenly clapped his hands and laughed heartily. Kalen was 80% cert that the child in General Sterling's womb belonged to the Dezhou royal family. But now, seeing Vice General Quillen, it seems not entirely so. Charlie, disregarding everything else, knelt on one knee. Your Majesty, General Sterling's child is your Majesty's son. I beg your Majesty to rescue General Sterling. Alaric, in fact, had never doubted that Astrid's child was his. He had merely panicked, both blaming himself for putting Astrid in such a dangerous situation these past days, and rejoicing that she carried his flesh and blood. A mixture of grief and joy overwhelmed him, rendering him momentarily speechless. After a long pause, he managed to say, "The Crown Prince is a magnanimous person. If you release General Sterling back to Dezhou, I promise that as long as I am on the throne, I will not invade the territory of Chi." Prince Kalen smiled, looking as noble as a jade tree. If one hadn't discerned his sinister nature, one would surely be captivated by this smile. Attendants, bring General Sterling here. Chapter 30. Alaric Windsor's gaze was fixed unblinkingly on Astrid Sterling. She had not yet regained consciousness, her butterfly wing like long lashes trembling restlessly, but at least she appeared unharmed. He was about to carry her back, intending to bestow upon her the highest title once they returned, so she could nurse her pregnancy in peace, but Chi soldiers crossed their long sabers, barring his way. Alaric's expression changed slightly. "What does the Crown Prince mean by this?" Prince Kalen smiled. "Your Majesty, do not be anxious. The condition you just offered was to take back General Sterling, not the child in her womb, correct? Kalen has heard that your Majesty has loved my wife for many years, but to no avail. Why not let Kalen solve this trouble for you? I will trade Serafina Beaumont to you, the child stays. Kalen has made a good bargain." He watched as a man dressed as an army physician came forward, pried open Astrid's mouth, and poured a draught to induce miscarriage down her throat. In an instant, Alaric, utterly disregarding the sharp blades at his throat, lunged forward. Charlie Quillen cried out in dismay. "Your Majesty, don't!" Charlie grabbed him, but Alaric, heedless, roared, "Kalen, you scoundrel, how dare you do this?" His neck was already wounded, yet his hand stubbornly reached forward. Seeing the potion finished, the mighty Emperor of Dezhou's eyes were bloodshot. He instinctively tried to draw his long sword to slay everyone in the tent. Charlie was filled with grief, but remained clear-headed, firmly gripping Alaric's waist. "Your Majesty, do not act rashly. Your Majesty, if General Sterling returns safely, she can surely bear another child for Dezhou." Alaric's heart felt as if it were being torn apart. In earlier years, he had made Astrid drink so many contraceptive drafts. He knew her body could not withstand another pregnancy and dared not harbor even the slightest hope. Now they had a child, their own flesh and blood, yet it was personally destroyed by Prince Kalen. He couldn't remain rational. His eyes were so red they seemed about to drip blood. Charlie couldn't restrain him no matter what and had to knock him unconscious with a chop to the neck. When Alaric awoke, the army was already on its way back. This war had been fought in a muddled, absurd fashion, ending almost comically. One could almost foresee historians in 100 years lambasting this Emperor of Dezhou for his incompetence. Alaric looked at the swaying roof of the carriage, closed his eyes, his heart a desolate, silent wasteland. He had terribly wronged Astrid. Reborn, he had thought himself the paramount sovereign, the true emperor, capable of at least protecting her. But he had been too arrogant. Astrid must hate him to the core. What face did he have to meet Astrid? Charlie, holding a tray with wound medicine, lifted the curtain and entered the carriage, meeting Alaric's lifeless eyes. He paused. "Your Majesty, you're awake." "Where's Addie?" Perhaps because he hadn't spoken for a long time, Alaric's voice was extremely hoarse, his tone almost cautious. "Is she still willing to see me?" Charlie, for a moment, couldn't quite look at him. He averted his gaze and said softly, "Your Majesty, General Sterling has just miscarried and is not fit for a bumpy journey. She found a manor to rest in and did not return to the capital with the army. She also said, since Lady Serafina has been found, there is no longer any need to see your Majesty again." With that, Charlie presented a brocade pouch. Alaric held the pouch. A small, hard square lay quietly within. His hand clenched it tightly. After a long pause, he tremblingly opened it. It was unmistakably the lesser Imperial seal. His vision went black for a moment. He found it difficult to breathe. Never before had he understood something as clearly as he did now. Astrid truly, genuinely did not want him anymore. The Imperial heir in her womb had been lost due to his recklessness, and there was no turning back. A suppressed sob was suddenly heard in the carriage. The young, handsome Emperor buried his face in the small brocade pouch, tears streaming down, soaking his lapel. The pouch seemed to still carry a faint, familiar fragrance, but he would never see his beloved girl again. Chapter 30. Alaric Windsor's recent excursion had not alarmed too many people. As he had expected, the war was criticized by many ministers, who overtly and covertly advised punishing Astrid Sterling to serve as a warning. Alaric could only smile bitterly. The person in question had already voluntarily returned her military tally and resigned from her post. He simply demoted her to vice general, a relatively painless move, and had Charlie, Quillen temporarily take the position of general. He missed Astrid every day and every night. The sovereign's hall was empty and desolate. Alaric couldn't bring himself to extinguish the candles. If the room was dark, he would inevitably be startled awake by nightmares in the dead of night. He often saw Astrid from his past life in her blood-soaked robes in the casket, Astrid in this life being forced to drink the saffron potion by Prince Kaelin, and his unborn child, lost before it could even take form. Astrid, holding the indistinct infant, would cry, "What else do I owe you? Alaric Windsor, I've given you 2 lives. Am I cleared now?" Sweat beaded on Alaric's forehead. He could only occasionally sleep well in the Jade Pavilion. Whenever he woke in the dead of night, he would clutch the carefully placed fox fur cloak, as if holding Astrid's fragrant, soft body. More leaves fell outside the window. The chestnut tree was bare, blown by the wind, left with only its branches. Winter had arrived. Charlie returned home carrying a pelt he had confiscated from a subordinate. Although promoted to the rank of general, he still lived in this small residence, unwilling to move. The old man next door was an old acquaintance and said with a smile, "Chuck, my boy, winter's not even here yet and you're already making cold weather clothes." Charlie scratched his head and grinned. "Just happened to get some fur, old sir. Do you know any good tailors?" "Quite particular, aren't we? What kind of garment are you planning to make?" Charlie hesitated for a moment. "I want to make one for a young lady. The waist needs to be a bit looser, and the fur needs to be treated so it doesn't have a gamey smell." The old man said curiously, "You rascal, when did you suddenly get the idea to find a wife? Why only loosen the waist? Is she a plump young lady?" Charlie thought of the woman in his room, basking in the gentle winter sun. A trace of warm tenderness flashed in his eyes. He pursed his lips and smiled. "She's pregnant." Astrid was sitting under the eaves. It was a rare sunny day. The late winter sun wasn't harsh, but rather warm and gentle. She couldn't eat much, appearing even thinner, but her belly had a small, noticeable curve, looking tiring. Charlie put down the pelt in his hands and went over to check her forehead temperature. A few days ago, Astrid had caught a cold and developed a fever. Now, she was ignoring advice and sitting outside in the breeze again. He worried she would get a fever again, but Astrid lifted her eyelids and glanced at him lazily. "Do you think I'm a delicate flower? Is that how you talk to your brother?" Charlie unceremoniously tapped her on the forehead. Seeing her pained expression, he then chuckled. "You look like you have good spirits. Drink that medicine today." Astrid rubbed her head. "Do I really have to drink it?" Seeing Charlie nod and resolutely go to the kitchen to bring the medicine that had been simmering all morning, she resignedly pinched her nose and gulped it down. This was her 3rd month living in Charlie's house. Her belly was already visibly showing. Charlie opened his mouth, the hesitant look on his face caught by Astrid. She said, displeased, "What's our relationship? Do you still need to be so reserved? If you have something to say, just say it. Not long ago, they were still superior and subordinate." Charlie, startled by her raised voice, flinched and said softly, "His Majesty seems to have no intention of marrying." He sent Lady Seraphina back to the Chancellor's house. There's a growing clamor in court for His Majesty to hold a grand selection for the harem. I've seen him, he's getting thinner and thinner. More than just thin, Charlie dared not mention or say. Doctors inside and outside the palace knew that His Majesty couldn't sleep at night and had no appetite, looking utterly dejected. Mentioning this person again, Astrid's heart still ached slightly. She caressed her belly, lowered her eyelashes, and said faintly, "From now on, I am not General Sterling of the court, nor the Addie he speaks of. I can raise this child entirely on my own, so his affairs have nothing to do with me." Charlie sighed, his expression complex. Chapter 32. Over the past year, the pressures from the court and his inner torment had made Alaric Windsor increasingly haggard. He had once sent out secret guards to find Astrid Sterling, but to no avail. He had also pressured Charlie Quillen, but the latter claimed they had lost contact. Many ministers were intent on pushing their daughters into his harem. Alaric could have simply ignored them, but he would rather face the direct remonstrations in the memorials day after day than do anything to betray Astrid. Now, although he didn't know where Astrid was, he was at least certain she was living well somewhere he didn't know. This was already much better than the previous life. The years passed, and it was time again for the annual day of prayer. Alaric, who had once disdained such things, now had to agree to the Ministry of Right's proposal. He had once been unwilling to believe in gods, Buddhas, ghosts, and monsters, but now he himself was a wandering soul from a past life, a bond forged at Lanyin Monastery. Master Silas still had that Buddha-like countenance. His long, snow-white eyebrows and beard made him look very serene, yet his eyes were sharp and clear, as if nothing could escape his sight. Alaric, dressed in simple robes for prayer, brought his palms together towards Master Silas. "Master, we meet again," Master Silas smiled. "This humble monk is meeting your majesty for the first time. How can there be a meet again?" Though he said this, Alaric felt that he actually understood everything. When Master Silas looked at him, his gaze pierced directly into his soul. Alaric could no longer maintain his imperial dignity. His eyes reddened. He wouldn't kneel on the prayer mat before the Buddha, but now he bent his knees before an ordinary monk, his voice choked with sobs. "I beg the master to enlighten me." Master Silas shifted slightly to the side, avoiding his bow, and sighed. "Your Majesty, this is already the best outcome after all your struggles, is it not?" Tears fell drop by drop onto the bluestone slabs. Alaric bowed again, saying piously, "Master, please show me a clear path." For so many days and nights, he had been tormented by anguish and regret, as if bitten by 10,000 ants. The common people all praised him for his diligent governance, calling him a rarely seen wise ruler. But he knew deep down that he simply had no way out. As soon as he put down state affairs, Astrid's image would flood his mind. Master Silas had revealed his heavenly secret with a single phrase. How could he miss this only possibility? He just wanted to see Astrid again. He was willing to give her anything she wanted. The power, money, and status he possessed, and his sincere heart. Master Silas sighed again. "From love, sorrow is born. From love, fear is born. If one is free from love, there is neither sorrow nor fear. Your Majesty, please go ahead." Alaric's eyes brightened slightly. He walked in the direction Master Silas indicated, bypassing the enormous wishing tree, only then discovering that Lanyin Monastery actually had such a large peach blossom grove. Before him, blossoms fell like rain, the flowers lush and dense. The voice he had longed for day and night was laughing joyfully and heartily amidst the flowers. It was Astrid. His pupils contracted, his breathing quickened, and his eyes stung with unshed tears. The last time he had heard her laugh so freely was during those days they spent together in the cold palace. For countless days and nights, Alaric had ruminated on the inconspicuous fragments of those memories, only then realizing that whether Astrid was the girl who saved him on that snowy night or not, he loved her. He couldn't leave Astrid anymore. Alaric wondered how Astrid might react upon seeing him, disgust, hatred, sorrow. Whatever it was, he was willing to bear Astrid's emotions, even if Astrid wanted his life. He clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and was just about to step out when he heard another unexpected voice. Chapter 33, "All right, Addie, your body hasn't fully recovered yet, you can't bear the wind," a gentle voice said. "Little treasure, come to me, your mother is tired." Interspersed were the babbling sounds of a young child and Astrid's feigned angry struggles. "Where am I so weak? Charlie, if you keep this up, I won't let you hold Theo anymore." "My dear ancestor," Charlie Quillen chuckled, "I hardly get to hold him twice a year. Haven't I been the one taking care of the child mostly? You're getting puffed up with just a little praise." Alaric Windsor staggered back a step. He leaned against a tree trunk, bending over, gasping for breath from the pain, his vision blurred with water. He saw a tear fall from his eye onto the new, tender grass, only realizing after a long moment that he was crying. He was crying again. But his mind was just a chaotic mess, a voice mocking him in his head. "Astrid Sterling has already waited for you for over a decade. What right do you have to make her wait any longer?" Yes, what right did he have? Perhaps he inadvertently stepped on a branch. Charlie immediately looked up in this direction, his gaze sharp as lightning. "Who's there?" He placed the small infant back in Astrid's hands, drew his sword, and cautiously approached. Alaric had intended to leave just like that, but now he was caught. He stepped out from behind the tree, his face ashen as a corpse. "It's me." His voice was so hoarse. Astrid looked at him, for a moment blankly, thinking, is he ill? It had been over a year since they last met. Alaric had become like this. He was so thin his robes looked loose on him. His jawline, high-bridged nose, and sunken eye sockets all bespoke his frail, sickly state. Little Theo babbled in her arms, his voice milky. He didn't understand why the adults had suddenly fallen silent and reached out his tender little hand to catch a falling blossom petal. Alaric's lips were as white as his face. He forced a smile. "Astrid, is this your child?" Astrid replied faintly within him, and seeing him about to approach, quickly hugged the child tighter and took a step back. Charlie even more instinctively stepped in front of Astrid. Their defensive posture and the tacit understanding in their actions made them look like a family that spent every day and night together. Alaric finally couldn't smile anymore. He held back tears, his eyes so red they seemed about to drip blood. "Is this your and Charlie's child?" He only looked at Astrid, completely ignoring Charlie's slightly trembling body. Then she nodded heavily, admitting without hesitation, "Yes, Charlie and I have been married for over a year." So that was why Charlie had lied to him a year ago, saying he had never heard from Astrid. So all those secret guards sent towards the northern frontier had been in vain. Alaric laughed softly, a laugh anyone could hear the bitterness in. "Congratulations, Charlie." He looked at Astrid, his voice soft. "And congratulations to you too. This child is beautiful, just like you." A metallic, sweet taste like blood rose in his throat. Alaric, while he could still move, turned and left. He was afraid of losing his composure, afraid Astrid would see him weeping uncontrollably, so his pace quickened. Only after he was out of their sight and tripped over a stone did he fall to his knees on the ground and wail loudly. He had once said that as long as he saw Astrid living well, this life would be a wish fulfilled. But seeing her with another, in such an intimate embrace, Alaric ached so much he wanted to tear out his heart and show it to Astrid, let her see his raw, bloody sincerity. Chapter 34. Alaric Windsor's demeanor was truly dreadful. Charlie, Quillen, regardless of his own feelings, stared blankly at his retreating back for a long while before finally looking at Astrid Sterling. She seemed entirely unaffected, kissing and cuddling little Theo, apparently very fond of this little face that resembled hers more. Theo, after being kissed by her soft lips, giggled, looking utterly innocent. Charlie sighed and removed a flower petal from the small topknot on his baby hair. "All right, I've been your stand-in father again." Astrid glanced sideways at him. "Is it a grievance for you to be his father? If you don't want to be a stand-in, find a girl and have one of your own. Don't keep longing for our little Theo." Charlie smiled bitterly. They had gotten along very well this past year, provided they were only family. He had thought spending a lifetime like this would be a blessing, but the moment Charlie saw Alaric again, he knew it was impossible. Alaric hadn't yet realized this was his child, so naturally, he looked heartbroken. For now, they could hide it, but what about when the child grew older? Alaric still had no intention of appointing an empress. This child would be the crown prince of Dezhou, the sole heir to the throne. Theo's nose and lips were just like his mother's, but his eyes were identical to Alaric's. Once he grew a little older, it would surely be impossible to hide. He frowned with worry, pinching Theo's cheek. "Why weren't you born in Qi? The farther away from that bad daddy of yours, the better. Prince Kalen of Qi is an unpredictable person," Astrid pouted. "When I negotiated with him back then, I said I had a way to stop Dezhou's army. He agreed to give me a fake abortion potion, but I never said I would stay in Qi to serve him." Both sides were dangerous lairs, but at least Alaric wouldn't harm his own flesh and blood. In comparison, that Prince of Qi was far too unfathomable. Charlie had only said it casually. He couldn't bear for Astrid to continue fighting on battlefields. Her first half of life had been bitter enough. If only her latter half could be peaceful and smooth. After playing with Theo outside for a while longer, they decided to go home. As they passed the wishing tree, a strong gust of wind blew past. The tree full of red ribbons swayed, rising and falling. Theo was so delighted he kept tugging at the red ribbons on the branches and actually managed to pull one down. The handwriting was new, seemingly hung up not long ago. Astrid glanced at it quickly, didn't see a signature, but it read, "May we be like swallows on the beam, seeing each other year after year." She casually hung it back in its original place. Though she had tried her best to tie it tightly, she watched as a second gust of wind came, and while the rest of the tree fell still, this particular ribbon drifted farther and farther away, vanishing in an instant to some unknown spot in the mountains. Astrid, full of apology, silently apologized to the ribbon's owner and then lightly patted Theo's hand. "So naughty, randomly pulling things. When we get back, Mommy will spank Theo." Charlie comforted her. Perhaps the Buddha saw the owner's sincerity and took it away early to grant their wish. Charlie had fully believed that someone like Alaric, who couldn't tolerate a speck of dust in his eye, wouldn't let him off so easily. But unexpectedly, everything in court remained as before, and Alaric had even promoted him twice. His status rose with the tide, and his salary naturally increased significantly. Astrid looked at the monthly salary distributed this month and wasn't surprised at all. He probably fears your meager silver isn't enough to support the family. But Theo is also his child. It's only natural for him to eat and use his father's resources. Don't be nervous, just use it as you should. Only then did Charlie feel relieved, instructing the servants to slaughter some pigs, sheep, fish, and chickens to nourish Astrid. Chapter 35, Perhaps it was heaven's will not to grant peace. The tranquil days were ultimately shattered. For the past few days, Charlie Quillen had returned from court, always looking worried and deeply troubled. Little Theo, now old enough to speak a few words, saw that this uncle who was so good to him was unhappy and became anxious too, clinging to his leg and asking to be held. Charlie then picked up Theo and kissed his little cheek. "What are we going to do? Your uncle is going to war. Little Theo won't be able to see his uncle anymore." Astrid Sterling walked out carrying a tray of food, and hearing this froze. "What's going on?" Charlie sighed. "Do you remember the fifth prince? The current Duke of York, Prince Garrett?" Astrid nodded. A bad premonition rose in her heart, which Charlie's next words confirmed. "He has colluded with the current Emperor of Qi, who was Crown Prince Kalen back then, and is on his way back to the country. There's no concrete evidence yet, but His Majesty intercepted his letters and has basically figured out their plan. Kill the current emperor, and Prince Garrett will be the only remaining royal bloodline." Theo didn't understand what the adults were talking about. Frightened by the serious atmosphere, he started crying and reached out for Astrid to hold him. Astrid frowned. "Then do you have confidence in this battle? Does Prince Garrett have many men?" "Not many," Charlie shook his head. "Their plan is to assassinate His Majesty. That army is merely 1,000 or so men, just a diversionary tactic." The Sterling army under Charlie's command had now been reduced to an elite force of just over 10,000. Dealing with this group was more than enough. Astrid breathed a sigh of relief. Charlie looked at her increasingly gentle and beautiful profile over the past 2 years, a sourness in his heart, and said gloomily, "Do you still love Alaric Windsor?" Astrid was taken aback by his question. After a long pause, she said softly, "No, I just feel he's still a decent emperor." It was true. Even though Charlie disliked Alaric, he had to admit that under his rule, Dezhou was almost a place where doors were left unlocked at night, and lost items were not picked up from the road. Prince Garrett was due to arrive in the capital tonight. Charlie stroked Astrid's and Theo's hair, then turned, donned his armor, and went out. Everything seemed to be in order, but Astrid had forgotten one crucial point. Theo was Alaric's child, the only royal bloodline besides Prince Garrett. And this was precisely the greatest bargaining chip for Crown Prince Kalen, or rather, the current Emperor Kalen of Qi, in his cooperation with Prince Garrett. At the third watch of the night, the scent of blood subtly wafted on the wind. Perhaps due to her instincts from past campaigns, Astrid couldn't fall into a deep sleep that night. She listened uneasily to the sound of the wind outside. Though she knew Charlie's subordinates were guarding the courtyard, her heart still throbbed with panic. Theo clutched a strand of her hair in his hand, his round, chubby face bearing a glistening drool stain. Astrid lovingly kissed his cheek and sighed, "Little treasure, let's pray together that your uncle and your father both remain safe." Just then, a light sound came from the roof tiles. Astrid shouted sternly, "Who's there? Show yourself." The main door was kicked open. Emperor Kalen strolled in leisurely. Astrid quickly scooped up the startled Theo. In a flash, she understood Kalen was after the child. "Why be so guarded against me?" Kalen smiled. "We've cooperated before, haven't we?" Astrid said coldly. "What do you want?" Her martial skills had grown rusty in the past 2 years, and moreover, with Theo, there was no possibility of escaping unharmed. She could only stall for time, but Kalen said, "It's no matter. Of course I won't harm him, such a pitiful and adorable little treasure." "Uncle, can I hold you?" Theo, though frightened, didn't cry but mumbled, "You're not uncle," in his heart. Only Charlie was his uncle. Kaelin wasn't annoyed, standing there with a gentle smile, looking at Astrid. A moment later, a subordinate dressed in Chi attire knelt on one knee and reported, "Your Majesty, Prince Garrett's side has already taken care of matters." A chill ran through Astrid's heart. She tightened her hold on Theo. Kaelin extended his hand very gently. "General Sterling, please come with me." Astrid had nowhere to run and could only follow him into the carriage. Kaelin maintained a refined and amiable demeanor. After boarding, he even gave Theo 2 candies. Theo, with great backbone, turned his face away. "I don't want your candy, Uncle." Astrid soothingly patted his back, her heart panicking, unsure what to do. A moment later, the carriage stopped before the palace gates. Astrid was helped down and saw Charlie bound with ropes, unconscious to one side, while Alaric was also surrounded and restrained. Prince Garrett's face was cold, but upon seeing Astrid arrive, a smile instantly appeared. "Alaric Windsor, look carefully, whose child is this really?" Chapter 36. By the age of 2, little Theo's features had become much clearer than before. When Alaric Windsor met those innocent eyes, dark as grapes, his entire body jolted. This was actually his child. No wonder Prince Garrett was so smug. Prince Garrett laughed. "Have you had your fill of being emperor in this position? Isn't it time to abdicate to your own son? Alaric Windsor, do you really think I'm a fool? If I kill you directly, how can I ascend the throne? Rest assured, after you die, I will take good care of the little emperor." So their plan was to usurp power as regent. If Alaric didn't sign the abdication edict, they would kill Theo directly. If he signed, then the death of an abdicated Emperor Emeritus wouldn't cause much of a stir. Astrid Sterling instantly understood Prince Garrett's intentions. She raised her eyes, her gaze as sharp as lightning, scrutinizing Alaric, and said coldly, "Theo is not your child, Alaric Windsor. If you sign this abdication edict, you will truly fall into their trap." Alaric looked at the edict in his hand, then at Astrid, and suddenly smiled. He said, "Addie, thank you for being willing to keep my child." He turned his head and announced loudly, "I am willing to sign, but you must let me say a few words to Astrid." They were surrounded by soldiers. It was impossible for them to make any other move. Theo was forcibly taken to one side, but being a sensible child, did not cry or make a fuss. Prince Garrett shoved Astrid towards Alaric. Only then did Astrid realize he was covered in deep and shallow wounds. Presumably, he had struggled before she arrived. The scent of blood assailed her nostrils. Astrid's eyes reddened slightly. "Do you think they will spare Theo and me if you do this? We will all die then." Alaric smiled and reached out to take her hand. This time, Astrid didn't pull away. Alaric's hand was very warm, but it was trembling finely. She felt a wet slipperiness. She knew it was blood. Alaric said softly, "Addie, you've suffered all these years. I love you. I am willing to accept this ending. The Buddha has shown me mercy. I am truly grateful." Astrid didn't know what he was talking about, but a small, hard piece of jade was slipped into her sleeve by Alaric through their clasped hands. He looked at her deeply, then released her hand and returned to the desk. His demeanor was so composed, as if what he was about to do was not go to his death, but to meet his beloved. "I know you want me to abdicate. What you want is not just the position of regent, but also the Imperial hereditary seal," he said. Due to blood loss, his voice was low and weak, but everyone present listened with bated breath. Alaric's gaze shifted to Prince Garrett, and he suddenly laughed. "Do you think only you have clever tricks? I long ago entrusted someone to take the Imperial hereditary seal far, far away. I want you to treat Astrid and Charlie well. Astrid will be Empress Dowager after me, and Charlie will remain the Imperial Guard General. In 10 years, Theo will have grown up." He looked at the snow-white, tender child with wide, bewildered eyes, smiling gently. "Then that person will return with the Imperial hereditary seal. If news of Astrid's or Charlie's death is heard, that person will jump into a lake with the Imperial hereditary seal and drown. You will then be an illegitimate, unrecognized emperor for the rest of your life." Prince Garrett's cheek twitched, but he suppressed his anger and promised not to harm them. He had gone to such great lengths precisely to ascend the throne without being condemned by the world. In his eyes, Astrid and Charlie were not threats. Astrid knew that person must be Alaric's closest confidant, head eunuch Miles. Her lips trembled slightly, her eyes filled with tears. The small jade seal was in her sleeve, pressing against her, causing an unbearable pain. This lesser seal was from the same stone as the Imperial hereditary seal and had the same function. She suddenly understood Alaric's intentions, her blurred vision turning to this man who had wronged her so much in the first half of her life. But strangely, at this moment, she felt not a trace of hatred in her heart. Alaric smiled gently at her. "Goodbye, my star." Theo was taken back to the palace by the awakened Charlie. A heavy rain suddenly began to fall from the sky. Though it was winter, rumbling thunder echoed. The rainwater washed away the bloodstains on the ground. Astrid, holding Alaric's body, suddenly remembered the red ribbon on the wishing tree. At the spring banquet, a cup of green wine, a song sung once more. "Again, I bow and make 3 wishes. First, may my lord live 1,000 years. Second, may my body always be healthy. Third, may we be like swallows on the beam, seeing each other year after year, every year." Only, in this life, there would be no more seeing each other. The end.